What is going on, everybody? Hopefully, guys are doing well out there. We are live from Las Vegas, Nevada, here in the CES 2026 show. We'll let some people filter in as I roll through the agenda. It is now 6 p.m. on the West Coast here in the great city of Las Vegas, Nevada, and it is Thursday, January 8th. Got a lot of things to talk about on today's show. Some of it has to do with Nvidia, as probably many of you saw during the CES. You had a keynote from Mr. Jensen Huang, the godfather of AI. He announced Nvidia's Rubin platform, which was, relatively well known. However, there was some things revealed as it relates to power management. There was some stuff on memory. There was stuff on cooling, which took the market by surprise. He also made the comment that Rubin is in, quote, full production. Talk about what that means and when you can actually expect Rubin to show up, and the companies that will basically telegraph when Rubin is actually available. There was a couple of companies that came out after the announcement that said when they are expecting Rubin to actually be live for customers. And that gives you a clear expectation when these chips come. Because as you'll see, and I'm sure as you saw, the NVIDIA Rubin platform has many advantages over and above even Grace Blackwell and certainly the previous generation Hopper. We'll discuss what this means not only for NVIDIA, the large language market, but also other competitors out there and even, the data centers and those types of things. Now, obviously, the Consumer Electronics Show is going on here in Las Vegas. And I was walking around the show. I've spent 3 days walking around, kind of seeing things. It's interesting. This is my third year in a row going to CES. And what I see is kind of a consistent pattern. Sure, when you're in Qualcomm's booth or when you're in Amazon's booth or you're in, even the Caterpillar booth or something like that, these more mature companies, their product lines have been in full production and, they're testing things on the edge. However, when you're looking at the Consumer Electronics Show, there's a wide range of products that are in different stages of development. So you have your concept products. And I'll talk about, there's several concept products which are gaining attention from investors. Even large cap companies like Amazon and Tesla are putting huge amounts of money and in some ways, and certainly in the case of Tesla, are banking the future of the company on products that are in essentially concept design mode. Then you have something after that that I would call prototype. And there's a certain amount of products that are in that prototype mode. And then obviously you have your production products. These products might not be wildly popular, or they might have just gone into production. You can even revert that back to Rubin, where it was a concept. They've obviously been prototyping it. Now they're in, quote, production of Rubin. But, when is it actually going to be available? When are people actually going to be use it? That's a different type of thing. However, I think when you're walking around CES, you will see these three stages of products. And what's interesting with software AI and hardware converging? There's a lot of people talking about physical AI. You have OpenAI, talking with or buying Johnny Ive's hardware company, where they're going to combine hardware with AI. You're certainly going to see it when we start talking about humanoid robots and all the ones that I show when I saw on the show floor. We'll talk about how we are trying to combine software with hardware. And that is going to mess up the timeline, because the software could be in concept mode and the hardware could be in full production, or the other way around. The software is ready, but the hardware is not. So I'll discuss that. It is important, I believe, as an investor to really understand all this. And when you understand it all, then it's going to allow you to, really, I think, make better investment decisions, particularly when we look at this kind of cutting edge technology that, again, is going to be paired with the AI. So I appreciate you all joining me, and we'll just keep things rolling on. If you have any questions in the chat, go ahead and drop them in there. We do have a producer in the background. He'll be saving your questions. We'll get to question and answer. That's our third agenda point. But first thing I'm going to start with is the Consumer Electronics Show here in Las Vegas, Nevada. Now, a lot of people, including myself, have been talking about these humanoid robots. And obviously, Tesla has been making a lot of news around this. You also have companies like Figure, which have been very well funded. You had Boston Dynamics, which I think is owned by Hyundai, if you will, showing off a humanoid robot, saying that, hey, they're in the factories. And everybody's at some level of either production or prototyping, or maybe in some cases, conceptualizing these humanoid robots. I can only tell you with what I saw at the Consumer Electronics Show, and I can confidently say that every humanoid robot that I saw at the Consumer Electronics Show would be what I would call in concept design. We're not even at the prototype phase with a lot of these things. Yes, you could call these like early prototypes, but to me, that's more of a concept than, hey, I've ironed everything out in the prototype stage and now I'm getting ready for production. These humanoids, as you can see on this far right-hand photo, almost all of them were in this environment where they were tethered to something basically holding them up. Or on the far left, they were on the ground. I saw this multiple times. They were on the grounds and engineers were screwing something in or plugging something in or trying to maneuver it in some ways. That leaves me to believe that no matter what Elon Musk says, and we know if Elon Musk says something's a year away, it's probably 5 years away. If he says it's months away, it's probably at least a year or two away. With humanoid robots, I still think we're 1 to 2 years away from these being out of prototype and into production. Yes, there will be companies that show off a few hundred units or tens of units, but just based on what I saw at the Consumer Electronics Show, and now I'm strictly talking about the humanoid robot, very similar to the one I have pictured here on the screen. We'll talk about other robots as well. I don't know maybe the technical term for these, but you have these stationary robots or these tabletop robots. These are in full production. We'll discuss that here in a moment. But when it comes to humanoid robots, these are 1 to 2 years away at least. Now, what I will say is I believe that the challenges with these things, there's certainly hardware challenges, but I think the challenges are likely more software related to actually get these things to function around humans, to get them to do something functional. I did have a video up on my Instagram. I think I might even posted it to X, where it was 2 robots that were boxing. And I was showing that video to people, and it was kind of funny because it was almost like, like if you guys have had parties where you've done those things that go up in the air and the kids kind of hit it, the piñatas, and the kids hit it with a stick and candy falls out. Well, you tend to like blindfold the kid and he's swinging all over the place. It's very similar watching these robots box. They almost were like they were boxing blindfolded. Now, the movements of the robots were good. The kicks were good, but they were a little out of control to the fact that they would come up to the ropes and they would punch and then the crowd would have to move back. It was actually very comical, but comical in a way that humanoid robots are still 1 to 2 years away from mingling both the hardware and the software. My guess is there's more software challenges than hardware, because Unitree is the company that was doing the boxing. And I believe they have partnerships maybe with Amazon or other leading companies out there. And so they're a top level company. They've got the movements down. The robots function relatively well hardware wise, but software wise, they can't even get them to box without looking kind of goofy. So we're still a ways away. I still believe 1 to 2 years away. Now, on stationary robots or vending machine robots, there were numerous of what you would call these coffee or latte making robot vending machines. These are stationary kind of arm robots where it's really just a device with an arm, and the arm grabs a cup of coffee and fills it up and then puts it down a dispenser. In the middle here, you have a chess playing robot, and this worked flawlessly. I played a game of chess with the middle robot here, and it worked flawlessly. I even made an illegal knight move, and it moved the knight back, and I took a piece with the knight, and it actually took the pawn that I had moved off to the side, put it back, and the game kind of reset itself. So these like stationary robots have advanced tremendously. I remember my first year at CES, there was maybe one, tabletop robot. There was one coffee making robot. Now there was at least a dozen coffee making robots, a dozen type of tabletop, maybe more like toy like robots that your kid can play a game with or interact with. So these are definitely getting to the point where you're in full production with these types of things. So these are vending machines, and I'm not necessarily talking about your soda machines. These are where a robotic arm is actually doing something. There were other types of vending machines, ones that did cotton candy, ones that did kind of 3D printing of chocolate. I saw that. You could do like custom chocolate. And so these are definitely in production mode. And I would tell you that a year or two ago, there weren't many of these in full production. And so that leads me to believe that humanoid robots are probably going to be on a similar type of timetable in terms of really being ready. And then I would guess by the 2028 and certainly the 2029 CES, there will be humanoid robots walking around on the show floor. Whereas right now that is not happening. In fact, a lot of the other robots that I saw that were like maybe a mini robot or like a dog, there was somebody with a controller, like a PlayStation controller, basically controlling it. Whereas these tabletop stationary bots, these were working. Other examples are kind of what I would call business in a box. These are laser cutting. These are 3D printers. These are, in some cases, welders, but mainly laser cutters, metal cutters. Now, I know this type of equipment has existed at the industrial level for a while. CNC machines, laser cutters, that's nothing new. And those of you that are in manufacturing know that these machines have been around for a while. However, the pairing of software with these devices, along with the price really dropping, have made these, quote, business in a boxes really viable. Really, really viable. If you want to get into metalworking, or you want to make custom signs or custom t-shirts or any of these types of things, in the past, you might have needed a machine shop. You might have needed specialized software training. Now you're literally going to your phone, finding a model, or doing some very kind of rudimentary CAD design on your phone or on a laptop or something like that. And you're clicking a button and sending it to these. I know I've been playing around with 3D printing. I bought three 3D printers over the past maybe 6 months or so. And it's amazing how well they work with how little knowledge I actually have of all that type of stuff. And so these businesses, well, you say these maybe aren't necessarily robots, but they do function a lot like a robot, where they have an arm on an axis and that is doing something automated. And again, these machines have existed for a while, but they are now coming down to the consumer level, both in way they function. You can have one in your garage, and also from a software perspective. And again, that I think lines up with humanoids, is that the hardware is kind of there. The software is definitely not there. So you got to give these things another 1 to 2 years before you're really there. Now, there are other robots that I would call absolutely in production. In fact, we're here at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas, and something very similar to what I have on the screen here, kind of a big, trash can looking thing. This was going around and vacuum the floors. The one that the MGM had here was a little more industrial. This one actually looks a little sleeker, but these can do tile. They can do carpets. And so these industrial cleaning robots very much in full production. Also, lawnmowers. If you've been to CES, you've seen the pool cleaners and the lawnmowers, and those get better every single year. In fact, the golf course that I play golf at a lot has a couple of these robotic lawnmowers. And I remember the superintendent of the golf course sent out like a newsletter essentially explaining the economics around these electric lawnmowers. And so that is being deployed across golf courses and other kind of commercial landscaping type of things where you have maybe a very large lawn, but they're also coming down to the consumer level. If you have a relatively large lawn, or even if you're somebody that doesn't like to mow your lawn, these robotic lawnmowers are absolutely in full production, and you could buy one and it'll do what you need. Also, tile and carpet cleaning. Obviously, most of us are familiar with like the iRobots and maybe the Roomba vacuums, but it's at the commercial level as well. And like I said, I did see it in use here at the MGM Grand in Las Vegas. Now, really interesting with AI glasses, because I remember my first year at CES, this was 3 years ago, AI glasses weren't really a thing then. Some of them existed, but they were more kind of niche products. Second year at CES last year, there was actually way more AI glasses companies. There were ones that have concepts. There were ones that had prototypes. I even tried several of them on. It was interesting. I went to the Amazon booth, and that was a product that they had in their booth last year, and this year they didn't have it in there. I think because what you are having is there's some very solid production models on the market. So you have Meta, and on the photo that I have, the Metas are on the left. Those are co-made with Ray-Ban. And then on the right are a prototype of Snapchat's, what they call the spectacles. And they look incredibly ugly. And people, when I shared this photo, people were making excuses for Snapchat. And it's, guys, Snapchat is a big company. Snapchat has been working on these spectacles for a while. They should have a better working prototype than that, honestly. And Meta announced this week that their Ray-Ban glasses, and again, this is according to Meta, but they said that their Ray-Ban glasses are selling so well that they can't even launch them internationally yet. And so you have that dynamic where you now have production level what I would call AI glasses or smart glasses, either from Meta. There's certainly other Chinese companies as well. More coming. I'm sure Apple will enter this market within the next 24 months. Probably Google as well. In fact, I think they've made some announcements there. Samsung, the other, notable brands that would get into an extension line, if you will, of their already existing line, they're absolutely going to get into it. But here's the thing about AI glasses. It goes back to a little bit what I said about humanoid robots, is that you have some hardware that is probably ready, but what's not ready is the software layer. And I think that's where we are with AI glasses, is that the hardware's ready, at least in terms of what the glasses are capable of doing right now. A small heads-up display, a camera, some speakers in the ears, all of that is standardized technology. And this was actually at the Qualcomm booth. Qualcomm has a series of chips that you can embed inside of the frames of these glasses, and everybody's building on Qualcomm/ARM technology. And that's what it's going to be going forward. What's missing is probably the killer software apps that the AI glasses can utilize. And here's some examples of, I think, killer AI software that is coming. And this came from a discussion that I had with my brother. We were kind of walking around the casino and we were talking about these AI glasses, and we were like, what would be cool is if these AI glasses start to, bring in the digital world. And so my brother's a single guy, he's out there chasing the ladies potentially, or he has a girlfriend, so I hope she's not watching. So before he had a girlfriend, he was chasing the girls on the apps, like the dating apps. And so obviously the way the dating apps work is you go on there and you show your interest, you put up your stats, if you will, and then you go and look at the girls' photos and look at their stats and their about me and whatever, and then you're making decisions on the phone. Well, a killer app on AI glasses would be to integrate that into the real world. So you go out to a bar, or you go out to a social environment, a club or something like that, or wherever, and you're walking around, and on your heads-up display It's hey, this girl over here, she's single, she's looking for a boyfriend, or she's looking for a date tonight, or she's just looking to have fun, or she's looking for, somebody that has their life together, or she's looking for a travel partner. And that all comes up heads up on your display, on your glasses. Now we're starting to mingle software and hardware and the phone life to the glasses. That's where things become real. Right now, the heads-up display just replaces the screen that you have on their phone. So do I must have these glasses? No, because all it is taking the text messages largely that I'm getting on my phone, and it's putting in my glasses. It's convenient for some people. Also, the speakers in here, also convenient. Where the glasses become a must-have is if I can go out and it's pinpointing which girls that I'm physically looking at are single and I might be able to have a conversation with. Now, another way this applies to is I'm walking around CES, right? And as you can imagine, I'm sure some of you have been to CES, some of you have been to larger trade shows or larger like environments where there's a ton of people and there's some networking involved. Imagine CES with a pair of smart glasses on where I'm walking around and above all the people is where they work, who they're looking to network with. And potentially the glasses is directing me or, matching me with people like, hey, you're into finance. Here's a guy that works at Goldman Sachs. He's definitely interested in talking to you. Or, hey, you're looking for information on semiconductors. Here's somebody that works at Nvidia. That would be a very powerful type of integration between the glasses and software. And I think that's probably coming over the next 1 to 2 years. I believe companies like Meta in particular are incredibly well positioned to leverage all of the data that they know about people, whether it's on Instagram or Facebook or whatever, and they're going to be leveraging that into a physical world, somewhat of a vision of the metaverse, if you will. However, more of an augmented reality of the human experience. And in some ways, I'm sure most of you notice when you go out and you go to places, everybody's got their head down looking at the phone. Well, if the glasses would allow us to start conversations or meet people, the glasses could become a killer hardware product with must-have software features in a dating environment, in a networking environment, in an environment where you want to pair two people together in the physical world that likely have some connection but don't know it. But the glasses could be kind of the bridge there. And so I think there's some killer software ideas with these AI glasses. And I'm actually very excited to see what Meta comes out with here. I think the hardware needs a little more tweaking, but I think also the software as well. But key point, the glasses are in full production and they work. Now there's hardware features like the heads-up display. That obviously needs more work, more technology, but it's likely coming. Now, what I just discussed is that the software is still what I would call in concept mode. You buy these AI glasses, and yeah, maybe they substitute the AirPods. Maybe it substitutes having, like if you're doing a lot of filming, holding your phone up, the glasses are basically doing that for you. But it's just substituting something. It's a nice to have thing. I believe there's software coming for the AI glasses to where AI glasses might not be a nice to have for some segments of the population. The AI glasses might become a must-have hardware product, and that's obviously great for any company, particularly Meta, but obviously Apple and Google and any of these companies, and certainly Qualcomm as well, that are building the hardware around that. Now, in terms of straight prototypes, as you can imagine, guys, the flying taxis are in full-blown prototype. I didn't see that many flying taxis. As I recall last year, there might have been 2 or 3 of these type of things. I really only saw 1 or 2 of these kind of flying taxi type things. But what should give you hope is 3 years ago, when I first went to CES, self-driving cars were in between concept and prototype. And now self-driving cars are here. And self-driving cars are actually not in just in production. They're starting to scale. And if you listen to the Fang Stock Recap Show, where I talk about self-driving cars in context of Tesla and in context of Google and Waymo, and in some cases as well, Zoox, which is owned by Amazon, they had a booth as well, a little bit smaller than Waymo's. The thing that is holding self-driving cars back is less the technology these days, and it's more obviously government regulation. It's the permits and the allowance of allowing to have more and more of these on the road. If you go to San Francisco, San Francisco City in particular, Waymos have completely taken over the city. And it's my view that in 2 to 3 years, maybe 5 years on the long end, every major metro city, particularly ones with good weather, the New York cities, the Chicagos, handful of other cities, might be a challenge for these to really scale. But the San Franciscos, the Los Angeles, the Austin, Texas, I think has decent enough weather. Certainly Miami, Florida, and other parts of Florida, they are going to have a massive number of these self-driving cars because the hardware and the software are both at production levels. And we saw announcements from Nvidia this week as well as it related to self-driving software. So that was CES. And I just think, I know I talk a lot about humanoid robots. I think there's going to be massive opportunity here, but just based on what I saw at CES, I would still say we're in concept mode with humanoids, which actually I think is a good thing for us as investors, because if you're like me, you don't have an unlimited amount of money to invest, particularly in these concept and these kind of, flyer or these products and these business models that need some development and some maturing. You don't have an unlimited amount of money to invest in these things. And so the longer they actually mature, the better from an investment standpoint. You can kind of see these things coming. I think really what's closer and what's sooner is the killer software applications for AI glasses. And who comes up with that will be very interesting. And then the progression that you see, self-driving cars were concept / prototypes 2-3 years ago, and now they're at scale, and it's very, very exciting. Now, also exciting was Nvidia's announcements. But we'll hit to the chat. Hopefully you guys are doing well. Remember to leave a question. If you have some questions, leave them. Once I get through the Nvidia segment, we'll answer some things. Yeah, I agree. So somebody's saying here that it sounds like a total invasion of privacy. Just because I walk past you doesn't mean I get to know my stats. And I would say you would be the one controlling that, right? You would have to click, like if you were on a dating app or if you were at CES and you wanted people to know, who you wanted to talk to, or if you were single and you wanted other people to come up and talk to you, you would signal that on your phone, or you would signal that in a certain way to kind of turn on that capability, if you will, for the augmented visual of that. And so I definitely think that's how it's going to work. If you want to roll around in incognito and have the glasses not say anything about you, totally possible. And I believe that's largely how it's going to work. My guess is these things will be rolled out in potentially a gaming environment. I think certainly me as well, I don't talk about video games a lot. It's not a market that I even have any active recommendations in, although we do look at Take-Two Interactive. And now that EA Sports or Electronic Arts is going private, there's not that many video game makers. But when you look at Microsoft, I think Xbox and Activision is still kind of a double-digit percentage of their business. What's interesting about video games is it's like the prelude. Without video games, we don't have Nvidia. So you could argue without video games, we wouldn't even have AI right now. And so I think the same thing with kind of these AI glasses. I think there'll be some gaming and some of that implementation first that will then, kind of roll us into other integrations, maybe more professional types of things. Do I think Apple's integration of the smart glasses would be close to a watered down version of the Vision Pro? Yes, exactly. This comes from V Slayer. I believe Apple is already having prototypes on this. And if anybody were to marry the software and the hardware very well, it would be Apple. But also a company like Meta has all this data on people and has it has a little bit more of a head start designing these types of things. So I think there'll be multiple players here, but Apple will, I believe, in the next 2 to 3 years, will absolutely have a product here. And I actually think it's not going to flop like the Vision Pro, because their price point on these things are going to have to be south of $1,000. And at that price point, obviously way more people. Now, the other thing, I don't think I had a photo up on my slide deck. The other product that Apple is working on, and inside of the Qualcomm booth, there was actually a prototype where it's actually headphones. And so the headphones function the same way that the glasses do. They have a camera embedded in it. There's other sensors, microphones, all those types of things embedded in it. And I know we talked about the FangStock show, I think it was last Friday, that Apple has AirPod prototypes in the works that largely function like smart glasses, where there's a camera embedded and there's there's slightly more capabilities. So I believe that the quote AI smart glasses, there's going to be multiple form functions for these things. There'll be the glasses, there'll be headphones, there'll also be what OpenAI has described and Johnny Ive has described is kind of a hockey puck device, if you will, that you wear around your neck. That has a speaker, has a microphone, has a camera. I don't know if that device and the headphones will be as of a must device. Do I must have those? I don't know. But I know that a pair of glasses with a proper heads-up display that marries software and hardware with that display, that could become not an iPhone like must device. Like, is my mom going to buy that? Are my kids going to wear it? No, but it becomes maybe an Apple Watch type must device. I see a lot of people wearing Apple Watches or a version of an Apple Watch. That is, obviously a very widespread device. And I think we're getting there. I think we're probably getting there. Bullish on Apple? Potentially. We'll look at Apple's chart here. Remind me to look at Apple's chart. There's some levels with Apple, and we'll get to that. Thank you for the $2, Mr. Jesse Hamlin, 34.20 with the $2 Canadian. Thank you so very much. That is very helpful here, particularly when we're in Las Vegas, Nevada, where I bought 2 candy bars and a soda, and it was $30. And I was like, no wonder people are not showing up here. Now, let's get to the second segment where we talk about Nvidia. On Monday, Jensen Huang gave a keynote and where he introduced the new Rubin platform. Now, most of you know we were on the Hopper platform. Then we went to Blackwell, and Blackwell is the one, if you're a data center or if you're an AI company, you can buy and get access to Blackwell if you have the money and you have the ability to put these things together. The next generation is Rubin. And Rubin was expected in the second half of this year. Now, also, NVIDIA is on a yearly cadence, a yearly release schedule. In the past, they used to release these chips every 2 years. They've accelerated that, along with everybody else in the semiconductor industry, to release these things every single year. Now, you might say, what is this Rubin? What is this Rubin? We'll talk about the full production here in a second. I'll get back to that here in a moment. But the first thing that I want to talk about is actually some of the stats that they put out about it. They're saying that the inference, which is the reasoning or the running of the model, if you're on ChatGPT and you ask it a question and it responds to you, the process in which it's responding to you is inference. They're saying it's 5x better than Blackwell. Now, every semiconductor company from AMD to NVIDIA to Intel, they're guilty of what most people call chart crime, where they put out these benchmarks, if you will, And these are under the best of circumstances. This would be like if I had a dating profile. Instead of being 5'10", guys, I'm going to be 6 foot. Instead of being 190 pounds, I'm 180. And maybe some of the girls, instead of being 35, they put that they're 32. These are always fudged a little bit, but we can we know this is better. And so maybe it's not 5x, but imagine if it's 2x better. Talk about the implications of that here in a second. On training, they're saying it's 3.5 times better. Let's assume it's just 2 times better. That means a model that would take 3 months to train now only takes 1.5 months. I guarantee you, every company on the frontier of training are going to want these chips as soon as they are available, and they're going to want them. Because as you know, the models are in hot competition, particularly ones on the consumer side. The consumer-facing apps, but even the Anthropics that are more business-related, they're all trying to maintain some leadership position, whether it's in coding or whether it's on the consumer side, or just continuing to release new features around video or photos or deep thinking type of models. They're going to want to remain on the cutting edge of that. And on the inference side, which I didn't talk about, and I think I have a slide here, what this does is if it's 5 times better or even 2 times better or 3 times better, that lowers your cost, because as that chip is running, it's obviously 5 times more efficient. That is going to lower the cost in which you can deliver the tokens. It's going to allow you, if you're a large language model like Grok, to increase the rate limits, potentially offer more services at the same price level. I believe this makes the H200 far less competitive. H200s are still being used quite a bit, but as the pricing continues to have to drop and the efficiencies and the speed in which these new chips operate, it certainly starts to depreciate H200s even more. And in some ways, this is making some of the data centers currently installing Blackwell. They're doing so at kind of the tail end of the performance gains and the performance advantages that the Blackwell has. So think about if you're a data center, and there's many of them that come to mind right now, and not the big ones. Okay, the Googles and the Amazons, they're constantly upgrading their hardware, and they certainly can afford to do that, and they're constantly going to be doing that. But think about that smaller data center. We'll talk about CoreWeave here in a second. We'll talk about Nebuous. We'll talk about IREN. Okay. These guys are all rushing and spending basically their entire bank account to install Blackwell. And now Rubin is coming out and is going to be available at the end of the year. And it's 5 times better. And so if you're Nebuous or IREN, it means you're going to have to go and in those cases, build another data center and go borrow even more money to buy these new chips. And is going to put some companies, Oracle included, in a tough spot. And if these things are 5 times better, run training 3.5 times better, you know what that's also accelerating? It's accelerating the time where we get to the point where demand for compute and the supply of it becomes in balance. Because as I'm sure everybody watching this understands, is the demand for compute, the demand for these chips is so far and away off the charts and so far imbalanced from the demand side. The demand for AI is far exceeding the supply. Well, as more and more of these chips come onto the market, that obviously helps fill some supply on. But also now you have more chips coming to the market that are 5 times better than the previous chips. Well, theoretically, now it takes even less chips to satisfy the demand that is in the market. Now, obviously, new chips that are 5 times better and that train models 3 times faster, well, it also has a way of continuing to feed the insatiable demand out there. But this is just something to think about, that these types of chips could bring supply and demand closer to balance. And that obviously impacts anybody that has been spending a lot of money here, including people in data centers that have just been installing Blackwell. Now, there's a couple of other interesting things as it relates to Rubin. Jensen Huang, known for his salesman-esque type of techniques, he used to say something like, the more you buy, the more you save. He's not saying that anymore. But one thing that he did say was that Rubin was in, quote, full production, and the crowd roared. Now, Rubin was expected in the second half of 2026. Now, is the second half June 2nd? Is it August 3rd? Or is it all the way into November, in December? The second half is really, really wide. But I believe with Jensen Huang saying, quote, full production this early is probably a good sign, and probably means full production, or the actual production units of these shipping to data centers is probably closer to the summertime than the fall and the wintertime. One of the reasons for that is Rubin is less of a step up than from Hopper to Blackwell. Hopper to Blackwell was a big jump. You had to reconfigure your entire data center from air cooling, which every data center in the world basically was operating on air cooling, and they all had to jump quickly to water cooling. And also there was a huge power step up. I don't remember the watts off the top of my head, but Hopper was operating on a certain power level, and Blackwell was a step up higher than that. Now, Rubin is a step up in some cases. We'll get to cooling here in a second. It's not on a cooling level. But from Blackwell to Rubin is less of a step up for the data center. They already understand liquid cooling. A lot of that supply chain is obviously in a backlog, but it's there. And they have a better understanding how to implement these chips. So I believe that the, quote, full production of Rubin is going to be smoother and likely faster than Hopper to Blackwell. And so in some ways, it makes, it's hard to say this clearly enough. It doesn't make Blackwell obsolete, but if you were a data center installing Blackwell, you kind of feel like you're installing it towards the end of the competitive advantage that chip offers. Now, when can you expect Rubin? There are two companies in particular that will be the first to launch these. The first one is CoreWeave. The second one is Nebuous. They both just happen to have large investments from Nvidia. Both of these companies, when they put out a press release that Rubin is, quote, available, that means Microsoft will get it next, and then it will trickle down to the rest of the market. CoreWeave said in a press release they expect to be one of the first cloud providers to deploy the Rubin platform in this second half of 2026. And so CoreWeave, not putting a date on it, but again, now what we're going to do as investors is trying to game out when the second half actually is. Is the second half closer to June, July, August, or is the second half closer to October, November, December? Right now, we're not sure. If I were to put money on it, or if Kalshi had a line on this, I would bet on the former. I would bet this comes sooner in the second half rather than later, just based on the information that we know. And we know this is a step up in improvement. The other thing that was this was really, really interesting with semis. And one thing that we are seeing with semiconductors is when Jensen Huang gives a talk, the talk is being digested and stocks are moving right away. Whereas a year ago, certainly 2 or 3 years ago, you could listen to Jensen Huang talk. You could take a moment to think about how this impacts the industry, and eventually the industry will move. But now semiconductors has more people paying attention to it. So when Jensen Huang says something on a stage, things literally are moving from a stock perspective almost immediately. And during a post-keynote Q&A session, so Jensen Huang had his keynote, and then he gave a Q&A session, a closed-door Q&A session with industry analysts here at the Consumer Electronics Show. And he reportedly highlighted a key feature inside of the chip. He didn't talk about this on the keynote, but he said there is something called built-in power smoothing inside of the Vera Rubin chip, which is, again, is coming towards the second half of this year. This capability is designed to stabilize power delivery and mitigate fluctuations in power. What is this going to do? This is going to make it easier for data centers to integrate with variable energy sources. Now, on a scale of 1 to 10, I have like a 4 or 5 understanding of how these data centers are delivering power. And what you'll find is, from an investment perspective, you don't need to know how, the torque that the nuts and bolts are going down on the car or the device. You don't even need to understand how transistors work, or backside power delivery, or even how the lithography machines technically work. You just need a broad understanding of how things work, in my opinion, as an investor. In fact, I think in some ways, the deeper you understand product, sometimes it can actually hinder your ability to invest, because I've seen many investors, particularly over the last year, these are from engineers. They kill Intel. They're like, Intel sucks. And it's like, yeah, Intel sucks. Their products have missed the mark. They have been passed by in a lot of ways by AMD and certainly Nvidia, and you can maybe even argue in some cases Qualcomm. But Intel stock is up like 100% over the past year. So you have to separate your engineer hat from an investor hat. And I think in some ways, to do that, sometimes you don't need to understand things as deeply as kind of the engineer or the employee level, if you will, if you were actually going here and implement this stuff. So my understanding is, to run a data center, and we're not talking about a data center like an Amazon cloud one that's serving up Netflix or the Amazon.com website. We're talking about an AI data center with Blackwell or these Rubin chips inside. They particularly around training. So if I'm OpenAI and I'm training ChatGPT 6 or 6.5 or the latest model, you need very smooth, consistent power without any, peaks and drops. And when you're on the natural grid, so you're connecting to the same grid as you and I are at home, there are these natural spikes. And there's these regulators that you have to install. There's a lot of things that you have to do. If you study what Elon Musk is doing at his Grok data centers, they're installing the Tesla Megapacks in part for backup, but also for smoothing of the power. Okay. Now, Jensen Huang and Nvidia saw that this is a challenge. And they are now solving challenges not just at the compute level. This is actually something that we really haven't seen in the semiconductor industry. Typically, semiconductor companies, all they do is solve for compute. They jam more transistors into something that takes less power. They try not to solve other things that maybe are outside of their control. But NVIDIA is in a different position. And they have hefty gross margins, and they certainly have the salaries and the capabilities to do this. So what they're doing is they're building in power smoothing. What this is going to do is allow data centers to potentially integrate more variable energy sources. So you're going to be able to do on-site energy generation. So maybe you're using these gas turbines. Maybe it's a mix of solar and wind and batteries. And you don't need this constant grid connection. And if you have the constant grid connection, you might not have to do as much engineering from kind of a power fluctuation standpoint. It reduces the need for certain infrastructure to handle the peaks, and this allows for potentially faster time to launch the data center. So I think we're going to get these Rubin chips a little bit faster than the transition from Hopper to Blackwell. And I actually think that the data center providers are going to be able to get these in the data center even easier, if you will, put easier in big air quotes, but even easier than the transition from Hopper to Blackwell. And here's what was really interesting. We're not just solving issues from the power side over at NVIDIA. What they also saw, and this was the big shock, is that they're using, quote, hot water to cool Vera Rubin. Jensen Huang saying, and I quote, "We are basically cooling this supercomputer with hot water. I believe it's 45 degrees Celsius. If you're here in North America, that's about 113 degrees Fahrenheit. I mean, that's pretty warm water. That's almost like hot water. It is hot water. and it is so incredibly efficient. So what this did is it caused an immediate sell-off in companies that dealt in the technology, whether it's HVAC, which is heating, air conditioner, and also there were these water chilling companies. They also immediately sold off. Now, this reduces complexity and cost. However, I think investors took this overboard, and this kind of goes back to what I said at the jump. Jensen Huang speaks, and 2 seconds later, stocks are reacting. And so that's the challenge these days as a semiconductor investor. And that is not just a challenge, it's a risk going forward. So if you're out there and you're investing in any part of the stack, certainly the supplier level to NVIDIA, certainly anyone solving problems that NVIDIA chips create, whether it's memory, cooling, data center, software, you have to be on guard. And I think you have to be ready to take profits, because NVIDIA is showing that with each generation, they're going to try to solve problems. In this most recent release, they're obviously stacking on performance increases. That's a given. Every semiconductor company wants to do that. And NVIDIA is certainly capable of it. But what NVIDIA is also stacking on is the ability to install and run these with maybe less equipment and maybe less supply chain. And also on the cooling side, this was very interesting that you're still going to need cooling, if you will, but maybe way less equipment as it relates to that. Now, the stock started to digest this 24, 48 hours later, and it's still believed that you are going to need cooling. And some of these companies are certainly not going to go out of business. And there's going to be plenty of Blackwell servers installed over the next 6 to 12 months. And there's certainly Hopper chips and other chips out there that need varying array of cooling, whether it's air cooling or liquid cooling. And so this is not technology going away. And you are also going to need some additional cooling hot climates. As most of you know, here in the United States especially, they're building a lot of these data centers in Texas, which is not necessarily cold or cool in the summertime. And many of them are getting stood up in Arizona as well, which is obviously almost never cold, or never cold in the summertime or even in the springtime. And so you just have to be aware of what NVIDIA is now and the level that they've reached. Okay. This company is solving performance issues, but at the same time, solving other bottlenecks that the data center and the end user is running into. They also made announcements around software and large language models. Didn't necessarily talk about it, but they also announced self-driving software, which more or less competes with Tesla. They have other open source large language models that they are working on that could potentially compete with other providers out there. They are solving problems across the entire stack, and that is a little scary, because NVIDIA obviously is the world's largest company. And when we go through their financials, probably in about 50 days or so, they'll report earnings. I mean, they're going to be absolutely unbelievable. And so the new reality for NVIDIA, but also semiconductor investors like you out there watching, is they're solving other problems than just compute. And so your other suppliers are going to face what I would call headline risk going forward. That's on the memory side. If they're like, hey, HBM's great, but we figured out a new way. I'm not saying that they're going to do this, but the Grok acquisition that they made was a hat tip towards, hey, HBM is expensive and it's hard to get, and you don't necessarily need it on the inference side. Well, maybe there's other memory out there that could become in demand. Now, this will create other opportunities as well. You start looking at the optics market, could create some opportunities, but at the same time create some challenges for those companies. On the cooling side, we saw that got play out this week, and also on the power side. There is so much inside of this announcement. I just thought the most interesting thing was he said these things are in full production. They're expected in the second half. That was confirmed by both Nebuous and CoreWeave in separate press releases. Supermicro Computer also coming out with a press release basically saying the same thing. When are these things available? It'll be when they're live on CoreWeave and Nebuous. These companies will be the first to get their shipments, and neither company, based on how their stock is performed and how much money they still need to raise, they'll be very quick to announce this, maybe even potentially faster than Nvidia will. Folks, that wraps up the kind of the presentation of the show, if you will. On the left there, you have one of these Grace Blackwell systems, and on the right, a photo of me looking somewhat miserable, but I was absolutely thrilled to be there, and it's been absolute a pleasure to be here in Las Vegas. Let's move to some questions. Does the new cooling technology affect Vertiv? My understanding is it doesn't affect Vertiv as much because a lot of the technology that Vertiv makes will so you still need water. It's just what temperature in which that water needs to be when it reaches the chip on the cold plate. And so my understanding of Vertiv is their technology is still needed and a lot of their expertise is still needed. Now, that's not to say there's not going to be other competitors there. That's also not to say that NVIDIA might design chips in a different way in the future. That's my next step is once I get out of CES. We're on Rubin. This time next year, we're going to be talking about the next chip. Off the top of my head, I can't remember what it is, but I'm going to be looking into that and what problems NVIDIA will likely solve there. My understanding, though, Vertiv is okay. Also, companies that make the actual cold plates, these are the plates that the chips actually sit on, those companies should be fine. It was really the water chillers and then also the HVAC companies. I think off the top of my head, maybe Cummins might be one. They're not companies that I'm actively invested in, so I don't know them off the top of my head. I think the energy side definitely had an impact on some battery companies. It had a positive impact, I think, on some turbine companies. In fact, John from our Equity Empire Service recommended a small cap turbine company, and that thing was up like 20 something percent today. And so I think very quickly the market is deciding winners or losers. And when you have the attention and the amount of money NVIDIA is bringing, it's happening a lot faster, I think, than I've ever seen before. What's my favorite meal at CES this year? I had Mastro's, which I've had many times. That's over at the Aria. I had Javier's today, Mexican food. I'm actually only eating one meal a day. I'm doing a lot of fasting, and I'm surviving on maybe a Cliff Bar, and I'm surviving quite a bit on Pepsi Zero. Pepsi Zero is, if you like or you have an affinity for zero sugar cola, this is by far, in my opinion, the best tasting one. And I go through an obscene amount of those on a daily basis. Favorite meal around Las Vegas, though? I did have Shake Shack. That's really good if you want kind of something a little faster and a little less casual. But I kind of have my go-tos here in Las Vegas. There's Bavette's Steakhouse in the MGM Park MGM. That's very nice atmosphere, very dark in there, somewhat romantic, but also kind of like mafia style in there. Very nice. Mastro's is okay. It's not, it's probably slightly overpriced for what you get there. I've had Peter Luger's, that's over in Caesars, and I've had many of the other ones here in Las Vegas. But I tend to go with a steak at night, maybe eat a little on the heavy side at night, and that's kind of my one. It's kind of my one meal that I go with. Let's go with some starred comments. Interested on my thoughts on what's overhyped right now. What's overhyped at CES? I'm trying to think what's overhyped. I think what's overhyped is probably what people are calling physical AI. Now, I think it's hyped as we sit here today on Thursday, January 8th, 2026. Physical AI is going to be a great market. The pairing of software and hardware is going to be absolutely amazing. But in terms of the timeline that is actually launched, I am actually putting out my expectations for it a little longer. I thought that humanoid robots would be not in full production where you and I can go buy one or lease one or whatever this year, but I thought probably would be maybe a little further ahead this year. From what I saw at CES, and there's many Chinese companies that are working on these things, let alone the Teslas and the companies here in America, they were way further behind than I thought. And so that is showing you that you're having some hardware challenges there and software challenges. I think AI glasses are also another perfect example where the hardware is ready, but the software is not. It's like, do I really need to run out and buy $1,000 pair of Meta glasses? Now, there are plenty of people that are doing it, but my belief is that those people are either on the cutting edge of a consumer where they always want the cutting edge device, or they have some very specific reason they want the glasses. They want that heads up display they're constantly checking their phone or their watch, and they love the convenience of that up there, or they like the speakers without having to have earbuds in your ear because maybe you're at work and you're not supposed to have AirPods in, or you're at school and you're not supposed to have AirPods in at class, but it's allowing you to listen there. It's also a way to have speakers, present all the time, but it's not a must-have device. So I think this marriage between AI, everybody talks about physical AI. It's coming. It's going to be big, but right now, in terms of what's available, absolutely overhyped. Now, we'll see. Meta has talked about how their glasses are sold out, but for a company of Meta's size, $1.5 trillion, $2 trillion, whatever it's trading at right now, it's not moving the needle for them. It's not moving the needle at all. What are our thoughts on Nvidia basically validating Tesla's camera-only approach for all those LiDAR fanboys? This is coming from Love Deep. So, yes, what I would say about full self-driving or autonomous vehicles or robotaxis, whatever you want to call them, I believe that there's probably validation for both the LiDAR systems, but also Tesla's system as well, which, if you're not familiar, as Love Deep says, relies strictly on cameras. I'm going to be driving home tomorrow, and I have a Tesla, and driving here, the Tesla drove the entire way, and I usually intervene in the what most people would call the last mile. So as I'm coming off the freeway in Las Vegas and I'm about to make my final turn into MGM, into the parking garage, I take over. Now, the Tesla just released software to allow the Tesla to go into the parking garages and actually park. That works well. It's not perfect. On the freeway, it's flawless. I never intervened the entire drive. It's a 9-hour drive or an 8.5-hour drive. I never intervened. The camera-only approach works. Now, in a blizzard, in snow, in bad weather, rain, sleet, those types of things, fog, does LiDAR help? Probably. Could LiDAR be a supplement to these things? I think so. And here's what I would say is, let's say we live in a world where maybe the California state government or the New York City government or the Chicago or the Illinois government says, for you to have a robotaxi, you need LiDAR. Well, Tesla's not SOL at that point. They are going to be able to bolt on some of this stuff. In fact, that exists here at the CES show. You have bolt-on systems to where you can take any car, and again, this is more prototype and concept rather than full production, but this is where the technology is going, where you can bolt on a LiDAR camera system onto a car and basically turn it into an autonomous vehicle. But I believe, just based on my experience running Tesla, and I don't believe the timelines that come out of Elon Musk's mouth, but I do believe him from an engineer standpoint that he probably has very solid opinions here, that the camera-only approach will work at a very high level. There's always going to be edge cases. The power is going to go out. Some human does something stupid, or there's a bunch of construction or something like that, and it's difficult for the car to see. But a camera-only approach has some huge advantages. someone waving you on, those types of things probably can be better interpreted and picked up by cameras. But the Nvidia system looked really impressive. I'd love to get into one of the Mercedes, which are coming here relatively soon. It sounds like with the software, I'd love to compare to it how the Tesla works. But my guess is we'll be sitting here in 2 to 3 years, and whether they call it full self-driving or they allow you to do it full self-driving or allow you to take your nap in your Tesla or your Mercedes, I don't know if they'll allow you to do that. But I think we're approaching very soon to the cars driving themselves at a very, very high competence level. Yes, there'll always be edge cases where they don't perform well, whether it's weather or some weird environment that it just hasn't came into. And here's the other thing I'll say is, if you solve driving, which is obviously at high speed and there's a lot of variables, the Tesla will now swerve around stuff in the road. It didn't used to do that, but my car will sometimes swerve around potholes, but also debris in the road. If it can safely maneuver around it, it will proactively do that. That's all something that's happened just in the past couple of months. And just pulling into charging spaces in a parking spot, that's just something that's happened in the past couple of months. So this stuff is progressing very quickly. And I think we move to a point where it is solved. Whether or not your government or where you live, they'll allow these cars on the road in large numbers. That's a separate discussion, but there it is. Sem34 says there is news today that President Trump will bring $200 billion to Fannie and Freddie lenders. When do you think will be a good day to get a mortgage? We're going to commit to a house purchase tomorrow. Here's what I'll tell you about home purchasing is I would not look at the house that you are going to live in and the house you are going to raise a family in. I would not look at that as an investment at all. Here's an asterisk above that. The only way that's a great investment is for your children. Owning a house is a great investment for your children, because here's what's going to happen. I'm going to live in my house. My wife's going to live there. We're going to raise our family there. My wife and I are going to die. And my kids, God willing, please, are still going to be alive when I die and my wife dies. They're going to inherit that house fully paid off, 100% equity. They can live in it if they want to. They can sell it if they want to. And they're going to put a big old bag of money in their pocket. Now, could I sell my house right now and have a quote profit over and above what I paid for it? Absolutely. But now I'm out on the street and I'm hopeless. So I now have to go take that chunk of money I just made and go put it into another house. So I never actually, now you do realize this maybe later on in life. You buy a 5-bedroom house, you raise your family there, you pay it off, and then your kids go off, they're successful, they're doing their thing. And you're like, I could downgrade to a condo, or we're going to go downsize, if you will. Then maybe you're putting some money in your pocket, but it's at that point in your life, it's not a life-changing thing, I would assume. It's probably not even going to affect your lifestyle that much, especially when we're talking about just one house. So I would never look at the house that you're going to live in as an investment. Are there times where maybe the mortgage rate is a little better than others? Yeah, but I wouldn't worry about that. I also wouldn't let that hold you back from getting your family in the house that you want to live in, maybe a school system you want to get in, or if you don't even have kids yet, don't let that hold you back. Don't let oh, I need to go buy a house, hold you back from any of that. Because like I said, owning a home you live in is only a good investment for your children or whoever inherits the house after you die. It is not that great of investment. And I say that as somebody that owns a home, very happy with my home, don't regret at all buying it. And if I sold it today, I would absolutely have money in my pocket. But I don't look at that as an investment and never think about it as one. I don't even think about, like, I don't know what I could sell the house for. I don't know what after taxes or whatever how much money I would have in my pocket. None of that ever crosses my mind. It's a place where my kids feel safe. It's a place where they can go outside and play and learn. And it's a place I'm going to look back on and have memories that are priceless. I'm going to look back on the house that I live in. And I told this to my wife, like because we have friends that are a little bit older, their kids are getting older and they're looking to move. And people are like, wow, why do they want to move? They live in a great house. And I kind of think at it as like, man, you make such great memories in the house that you raise your kids in that it might almost be painful to stay there after they're gone because the memories you created were so amazing. You might want that fresh start. And so those are some things to think about. I hope I answered your question. I wouldn't worry about interest rate. I wouldn't worry about any of that. I would just buy the house that you want and buy the house you can afford. Don't buy the house your real estate agent wants you to afford. Don't buy the house that the lender wants you to. The lender and the real estate agent is always going to want you to spend more money than you probably want to spend. Don't let them make the decision. You go out and find what you want to spend, find the house you want to buy. You make the decision, and I don't think you'll ever regret it. What impressed you most at CES or anything you feel the world must have? Tell you what impressed me the most was I talked about how I've gotten into 3D printing. It's kind of a hobby. I'm running a little bit of I don't know if you can call it a business. I'm making tens of dollars, if you will, 3D printing. But I'm having a lot of fun. I think what's impressing me the most is the CNC machines, these tabletop. Some of them are more on the commercial grade side where it can be a machine shop, have one of these things. And some of it can absolutely be on the consumer side. I talked to a guy that has one of these laser cutters and he's like, I have a real job and I got one of these laser cutters and it's in my garage and I cut metal and I cut wood and I sell stuff and I make stuff. This wasn't the case a couple of years ago. And so these are really impressing me. These industrial level machines that are now getting advanced. The laser cutters and CNC, that's not technology that has changed. What's changed is the software integration with the CNC machine. So I don't need to know some really like confusing CNC software. Like this is really, really cool stuff. This really impressed me. This really impressed me quite a bit. The other thing that impressed me quite a bit is also what I would call maybe a business in a box, if you will, are these one-dimensional vending machines. But obviously going above like the soda vending machines or the candy vending machines that we're familiar with. There was a ton of coffee ones. There were ones that did phone cases. There were obviously photo booths. There were these like machines where if you wanted to get into the business of something, I think these are cool. And then obviously kind of tabletop entertainment devices, if you will, also very, very, very functional and extremely impressive. And then obviously, just from a technology standpoint, these self-driving cars are unbelievable. Whether it's Tesla or Waymo or Zoox, one thing that I will tell you with self-driving cars is I wouldn't get too wrapped up into it being like a competition between Tesla and Google or Uber and Google or LiDAR versus the camera tech, or even Nvidia or Mercedes versus Tesla and those types of things. This is going to be a big enough market to where, there's going to be so much opportunity here. And what this is going to do is drop the price of transportation down. And we're not talking about just the price of transportation of people. We're talking about the transportation of goods and services as well, potentially. This has huge impacts, and this is production ready. The only thing holding it back for the most part is the good old regulators that we vote for. Those are the ones holding this back. This is pretty much ready. This is better than a human under most circumstances. Now, does it make mistakes? Does it make comical mistakes? Of course it does. But I think most of you remember in the early days of AI, people would post about the hallucinations and the errors it made, and articles were being written about it. Now you don't see a lot of that. It still happens. The hallucinations still happen. But most people have moved past that and are just focused on the positive aspects of that. And we're getting there with self-driving cars. We're like, yeah, when the power goes out, they might screw up. Or yeah, I saw a video of a Waymo on a train track. I mean, this is not great stuff, but compared to human drivers, plenty of humans have stalled on train tracks and run into things. So compared to humans, it is likely better. Well, not likely, it is better. Chiropractic robot, Joe Little with $1.99. Thank you. I was looking for one. You know what was there a lot, and it's there every year, are these massage chairs. Now, it was so funny. In the past, they were called massage chairs. Now they are AI robotic chairs or something like that. And there were these chairs that like massaged you and moved your arms up and your legs up, and they look super impressive. There was actually less of them at this year's show. There was really just kind of like one or two dealers. As I remembered in the past, there was more of them. I was looking for a chiropractor because my back was very, very sore today. I couldn't even wear my backpack to the show today because I was like, oh, my back hurts. And I was looking for a robotic chiropractor, but didn't see one. There were the massage guns. I'm not exactly sure what those are called. There's ones that athletes use. And those are really popular. There were people giving massages and neck massages with certain types of devices and those types of things. But a robot that actually cracks your back, probably coming, but we're years away. How efficient is the current battery technology in a robot? Can't imagine having a robot weight like a Tesla. I think the battery tech is going to be fine. I think it'll be very swappable. So you are going, I don't know what the battery life will ultimately be on these things. It probably depends on how much strain is being put on it. If it's just reaching over here and putting something over here, that probably doesn't require a lot of energy. But if it's lifting 30, 40 pounds and having to walk across a floor, obviously the battery is going to drain a lot faster. My guess is these things will weigh. I think I've even seen weights, prototype weights on these things. They're pretty heavy. But I actually don't think the battery technology is what's holding it back, because I think you can design these things to be very swappable. So if, let's say you owned one of these robots, you would own one robot and probably two batteries and then a charging unit on a wall. And the robot, when the battery was getting low, would walk over to the wall, the batteries would swap, and then that one would now charge and the robot would walk off and then go do what it had to do. And so I think that's more or less how they're going to be designed, at least from a commercial level. Now, from a consumer level, it could be that the batteries don't swap, but they're easily chargeable. And considering a Tesla, you can charge a Tesla, to full capacity in about maybe 30 to 50 minutes, depending on the model and how you're charging it, but maybe anywhere from 45 to 50 minutes can charge an entire electric car. My guess is they're going to be able to design these robots to be fully charged in probably 15 minutes, maybe 10 minutes, maybe even faster than that, depending on the technology. And so I don't think the battery tech is going to be the limiting factor here. That's what I would say. Wondering if people go to CES because they are enthusiastic or if companies sponsor them. So yeah, I think it's a mix. Obviously, it's a mix of, your company wants you to come here. But what I will say is I saw a lot of people with Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley and Bank of America, and I saw a lot of analyst badges. So there's a lot of people like me that come to these things and are just trying to absorb what is happening and trying to make sense and kind of puzzle piece, if you will, what's happening. The other thing you do see is a lot of creators here. I saw a guy just randomly at a booth with toothbrushes, and he had his whole, he had his phone up and they had a camera crew, and he's talking about toothbrushes. And so there's, a social media aspect to this. There's also a supplier aspect. That's something that I didn't really cover or really, talk about, but on the edges, there's all these suppliers. So if you need a sensor supplier or a glass supplier, or if you need anything, there's all that. Also, all your competition is likely here as well. And so you show up at CES and you go over and look at your competition's booth and you see where your competition is saying, and it's kind of a way to, measure that, if you will. Because as you walk through, like I was walking through e-bikes, I thought that was interesting today. I was walking through that kind of where there was e-bikes and scooters, and you could kind of tell, like, okay, this company's probably doing pretty good. Their booth looks really good. Their products look really slick. And then you walk over here to another company where their booth is a lot smaller and it's way less produced. And you're like, yeah, this e-bike company's probably got some work to do. And so there's a little bit of a measuring stick among your other competitors as well. And I think it's probably, in some ways, it's probably profitable for some companies. Because if you look at like an Intel stock, what did Intel stock go up this week? Let me see if I can actually bring that up. I don't know if this is going to show up, but let me pull this up and see if it shows up. Yeah, we're good. Okay, so let me bring up Intel stock. So Intel announced Panther Lake, which I think to the public they're calling Ultra 3 or something. Well, Intel went up only 2% this week, but it was up at $44, so it was actually another 10% higher. Basically, or about 8-9% higher. So to a $200 billion company, to even add 2% to your market cap in a week, based on some announcements that you made at CES, that's probably a really good thing. And there's probably better examples than Intel, but that's the one that comes to the top of mind. Is that you come here to get press. The other company that I thought made positive press from just a semiconductor standpoint was Qualcomm. Qualcomm stock actually went up 3.3% this week. And this is not a stock that's like one of these high flyers that's year to date. Over the past year, it's up 14%. So, in fact, in a week, you're up 3% is a big deal. And you're talking about a $200 billion company. There, you're getting in front of press, you're getting on TV, you were able to make news. And then obviously Nvidia is making tons of news with keynotes, and so did AMD. And so I think some of that as well, when you get to the larger end of CES, you're coming there to get press. You're coming there to have people kind of take notice of what you're doing. And so I think there's absolutely some value to that. Do you think Apple, so I answered this question with Apple and smart glasses, it is absolutely going to be a iteration on the $4,000 or how much they cost Vision Pros. They got to make them cheaper. They just have to make them cheaper. Thoughts on Constellation Software? I don't think CNSWF, when it has that much ticker. Oh my gosh. It's 2000. It's a company I don't know. I'll be honest with you. I don't know enough about. And you are at a $49 billion market cap. So this will be on the list of companies that I look at. And, but I don't know enough about this company. It's down 20% over the past year. I will tell you that software, as you probably know, has been tossed out by the market. I think that's a huge mistake. Now, when do I get proven right? I don't know. And I did say when, it's not if. Software is going to become, and that was what my live stream was largely about, so I don't need to go necessarily get deep into the thesis. But software is going to be a huge part of AI. It's not going to be that ChatGPT invents every piece of software and just totally eliminates everybody. In fact, quite the contrary. OpenAI and Anthropic and Grok, they're going to enable software, not just on the Adobe level and maybe the existing kind of grandfather software, if you will. It's not just going to apply to these companies. There's going to be, the next Palantir and the next, those types of companies are going to exist. And then even other companies like a JP Morgan and those companies are really going to integrate it. But I will take a look at that company. It's one I'm honestly not familiar with. Thank you again, Jesse, for the $2 Canadian. I really appreciate it. And I do appreciate you. Constellation Software. I know Constellation Brands reported their earnings today, but that'll be my cue to remember to look at and remind me, if you tune in, Jesse, on another show, remind me Constellation again. I'll actually know something about it. What's Avgo position in this wave and this impact on the valuation? Broadcom's fine. I think what Broadcom is suffering from a little bit is people are paying, like, a year or two ago, nobody, I don't want to say nobody, but less people were paying attention to Broadcom. And now this company is under the microscope. And I see people talking about valuation and this type of stuff. It's trading at 33 times. And they're saying, Socktan is sandbagging the EPS going forward. And so are the analysts. So this thing is probably trading south of a 30 times forward valuation. and you're getting a dividend on it. You're getting buybacks. I mean, my long-term view is this is a $3 trillion company. Everything that I've seen out of Google is that they're going to be able to accelerate the number of TPUs that they're going to get. They're clearly the lead customer here. The more TPUs they get their hands on, the more they're going to potentially sell to other customers as well. The other thing that I saw is that customers like Anthropic and even Meta, as most of you likely know, are going to be able to get their hands on Google's version of TPU. So what is this going to do? This is going to allow Broadcom just use some existing technology and get these TPUs in the hands of faster and faster people. And if we know anything about AI, is that these chips are getting more and more specialized, and there is a lot of advantages to having your own custom platform. Now, is everybody going to have their own custom platform? Absolutely not. That's not going to be the case. But is Google and Microsoft and Meta and certainly the Anthropics and the open AIs, are they going to have their own platform? Absolutely. And Broadcom is by far and away the leader there. They also have a software company that happens to print 90% gross margins and is still a huge percentage of the business. And they also happen to own a networking business within their semiconductor business, which also, along with Nvidia, is essentially viewed as a market leader. This is a great company. Over the next couple of years, they're going to print very large amounts of operating cash flow and free cash flow, which they're going to use to pay down debt and eventually, I believe, make another acquisition, very similar to what Nvidia has been doing. This is, of the semiconductor companies, this is a must-own, along with, obviously, Nvidia. Speaking of energy for data centers, what are your thoughts on Fluence Energy, FLNC? Tell you what, energy, I think, well, I mean, this one, the chart looks amazing. Let's just say that. We might as well get TradingView up too. And what I would say is, on the energy front, is for the premium subscriber, the action has been more on the small cap side. We've recommended a number of what I would call energy plays, and they have worked out relatively well. There's been some big ones. I think we were in Bloom Energy, and we've closed that one out for a large gain. There was a handful of other ones as well. There was one we just recommended, I think it was in December. Like I said at the top, that one went up like 30% today. So I actually think that I tend to just look at larger cap companies. I don't think there's as much opportunity on the energy side because those businesses are so diversified. But this chart looks absolutely fantastic with this company here. You're trading close to the middle of a range, and this would be an area where if you were dying to buy shares, you could buy a handful of them at this level. You've confirmed a new higher high. In the shorter term, you should have some support here. A deeper pullback could be bought. Wouldn't want to see the shares get meaningfully below a few areas. In particular, back, I know this sounds like a long ways away, but it is still a relatively small company. You wouldn't want to get below kind of the $6 to $7 range. You get below here, the entire trend is over, and you are likely to retest areas south of 5. And so the other area that, if you want to be a little more conservative, since there is a massive gap in the chart between 11 and 7, you actually would not necessarily want to see this one get below about 12. So if you want to be a little more cautious, I'd have a stop loss in this kind of $11 to $12 range. Because if you do not, I know this gap is technically filled on the way up, but sometimes these gaps will also fill on the way down. So that's what I see technically with that chart. Now, I already answered that question. New cooling technology affects verdict. We did talk about this. I think it was this question. I don't think it applies to Vertiv, but it definitely applies to some companies. And what I would say is this will apply to Rubin, but as we move to the future generations, NVIDIA is going to continue to solve problems and make these chips more, for a lack of a better term, plug and play. Right now, you get a GB300 and you need all this stuff. You need all these generators and all this stuff. You need a generator and a water chiller, and you need a power smoother, and you need all this stuff. I think Nvidia's ultimate goal is to make these much more plug and play, as to to the ability in which these things are quote plug and play. That's where they're going, and that does hurt downstream suppliers. But what I would say is with a Vertiv and a CLS or any of these, what I would call ancillary plays, you should be looking to take profits on those. Is Vertiv going to be around in 30 years? I don't know. I honestly don't know. I don't think anybody knows. Is Nvidia going to be around in 30 years? Probably, like certainly compared to Vertiv, it's probably, much more certain about that. And so that's what I would say about these companies that have gotten a kick step on a product. You likely want to take some profits. It doesn't mean you have to sell every one of your shares, but a portion of the shares, in my opinion, would be advisable. Given how far we are behind on robos, is there any potential dip coming for Tesla? Their sales are down for the past 3 quarters. I would expect Tesla to have a pullback, and I didn't necessarily see the price action today. Looks like it went up by about 1%, but I mean, you are kind of actually already in the midst of a pullback. However, it is a resumption of trend pullback, not only kind of what I would call an intermediate trend. This stock has been in a very beautifully well-defined intermediate uptrend, starting in basically the April lows, and most stocks, or a lot of stocks, have been forming this type of uptrend. And so you've been in that uptrend, but also I would call kind of what I would call the long-term uptrend, where the previous highs were up here at 487. I'd say functionally we created a new higher high. Wasn't to the dollar, but yeah. And obviously, if you want to stretch this out to an all-time chart, Tesla is still very much in an uptrend. And so when you are at these levels, you naturally have these pullbacks. The full pullback that is interesting is very close, but it's down here at $412. Further down would be an absolute buying opportunity, particularly if you don't have shares of this company. Now, the next earnings report is in 20 days. However, most people know what to expect there. What I think could damage this stock a little bit is the robo-taxi rollout has been relatively slow and methodical. Some of that is Tesla's problem, and some of it is regulators' problems, but it's slow and methodical. And the humanoid robots are likely 1 to 2 years away. The Optimus, for sure. For sure. I don't think we're sitting here a year from now and you and I are anywhere close to buying an Optimus. 2 years from now, is it like the Cybertruck and a couple of people have one? Like 3 months after it comes out? Yeah, maybe we're there. Maybe. But I think we've got a ways to go. But could Tesla pull back? Absolutely. Technically, it's saying that, it is due for a pullback. So it's not alarming if Tesla does pull back. What is my thoughts relative to Waymo, Tesla, full self-driving? I think Uber relative to Waymo and full self-driving. So we talked about this on the last live stream. I bought on Aria of Quality Invest, and he was talking. He's an Uber bull, and he's been in that one for a little while, and I think he's still up on it. My view on Uber is that Uber's business, as we sit here today, is amazing. They have an amazing brand, and from a software perspective, it's really great. Distribution, it's wide, it's far, and it's great. Uber's business, as we sit here today, is great. I also think Uber is going to be able to integrate certain autonomous vehicles into their fleet, whether it's something that they own outright or they partner with somebody, or Waymo puts some stuff on their fleet like they have in certain cities, or Tesla does it. But the perception around Uber is more difficult, in my opinion. It's very similar to Adobe. Adobe, their numbers look great. The software works pretty good. In fact, some of the AI software that they've layered in is fantastic, but it's not great. Uber, from a technical perspective, we are looking at a micro trend, has been made a very steep series of lower highs and a very steep lower lows. The fact that it bounced off this level is good, but you still need to push your way back up into the $92, $95, $97 range for Uber. And even in that case, it could be rolling over. This one at lower levels could be a buying opportunity, because I do believe in 5 to 10 years, Uber is around. Uber is a transportation force. But has the easy money been made in Uber? It's potentially possible. The story around Uber has changed, and that's what has me concerned. The business is fine, the CEO is amazing, but the perception around the stock has changed. A great other example is Intel. In fact, I sent out a note to our premium subscribers this week about Intel, where I talked about a year ago, I was talking crap on Intel. In fact, I had a tweet from January 7th. I wrote this article yesterday. I had a tweet from January 7th. I was at CES and I made a joke about Intel. It's funny because a year later to the day, Intel is still kind of a joke. They'll report earnings in 14 days. They're going to be a disaster. The foundry doesn't really have a significant outside customer. Their chips are still getting beat by AMD and certainly Nvidia on the data center and GPU side. Everything's not great with the company. But look at the perception of the stock. It's doubled in a year. And so, yeah, looking at P ratio, looking at fundamentals, looking at charts even, it's all very important. But what's also important a lot of times with stocks is the perception, both good and bad, and how it can change. And I think with Uber, to wrap it back to the viewers' questions, with Uber, the perception is changing. And I worry as an investor, does it change so much that people just don't want to buy the stock? Because you got to think, it's like somebody's thinking about buying Uber stock. They don't want all these questions in their mind. Like, oh crap, what about Waymo? What about Tesla? And I believe that, and there's Amazon here as well with Zoox. And they're out here testing. They're out here testing in Las Vegas. I didn't see a Waymo. I don't even know if Waymo's already actively testing out here in Vegas, but I know that Zoox is testing on the Las Vegas Strip out here. And so you are going to have multiple players in the autonomous vehicle space. And what has me worried with Uber is every major market, whether it's Las Vegas or San Francisco or Los Angeles or any of these markets, they are going to lose dramatic market share in those markets. They've already lost it in San Francisco. They've already lost market share there. That is proven. And if you're Uber and you lose even a sliver of business in your major markets, that does impact you financially because most of their revenue is going to come in from those spaces. And I think I think Waymo and Tesla have some competitive advantages that Uber doesn't have. And yeah, Uber has more customers. Uber has probably slightly slicker software on their app. But Waymo and Tesla are not going to have to compete on that. They're going to be able to compete on price, and they both have distribution. And then when you layer on Amazon in here, what if Amazon is like, hey, if you have an Amazon Prime membership, Zoox rides are free? I mean, can Uber compete with that? And Google is obviously can run ads anywhere they want. And that's Waymo. And Tesla obviously has advantages that the other two don't have, and that they can make these cars probably cheaper than anybody else. And they own the software stack on top, which appears that it works pretty well. And it's actually a lot cheaper to implement than the camera technology. I think all of those things are going to be a challenge for Uber, and investors are digesting it. And the more that these autonomous vehicles get on the road, because right now, unless you're in San Francisco or Los Angeles or Phoenix or Austin, Texas, you don't even think these things exist. But then when you go to San Francisco, you're like, holy shit. I mean, that's when it was like a holy S moment for me for Uber. Is every 2-3 months I was going to San Francisco City and I was like, oh my God, look how many Waymos there are. It's unbelievable. It is shockingly overwhelming when you go to San Francisco for the first time and you see, especially if you're like me and you've been consistent. I mean, I've been consistently going there my entire life, but really over the past 18 months, it is an exponential step up every time I go there, how many more Waymos there are. And then now you're going to add Tesla and you're going to add Amazon and probably another company at some point to that. And yeah, I would not want to be Uber. That doesn't sound great. How do I envision Mag 7 CapEx coming, return on investment capital coming to fruition? Well, it's going to look pretty bad When you're paying 70% gross margins, it will improve over time with software integrations. I believe that it's not going to look great over the next year. And if investors want to, if that's the key metric that investors invest on, you might as well go to this is why people have piled into Nvidia and to Broadcom to a certain degree. And I think even Intel's getting maybe some, on the pure speculation side, investors are like kind of penciling that in the future. The return on investment capital is not going to look good because you are not monetizing these assets and this software to the fullest degree yet. It's more of an arms race to start, and then you're going to monetize it later. And so it's not going to look good. And so the companies that can tell the story and can wade through it the best will be able to hold their share prices where they're at. What I think this is it's the Mag 7 I'm not worried about. It's the quote smaller companies. I think you could throw OpenAI as $500 billion, $600 billion, $1 trillion, whatever it's worth. It's much smaller, obviously, from a revenue standpoint. And so the companies that have monetization, the Metas, the Googles in particular, even Apple, if it wants to come into this, Amazon as well, launched Alexa, which was like a ChatGPT like thing this week. These companies have other businesses and other levers that they can pull. They're going to be fine. And in some ways, they can distract you from the other things happening in the business. I would not want to be anyone competing against them. I know that on the software side. Is there anything from AMD? Yes. There was stuff from AMD this week. They announced some stuff on the data center side from a gaming perspective, because AMD's business is it's very similar to Intel. It is diversified across PC, desktop, AMD certainly in gaming as well, and also obviously AI and the data center and their MI series of chips, essentially competing with Nvidia. And then they have Xilinx, or I think that's what it's called, another company that does some embedded and some custom stuff. And so they announced some stuff. My read, and I could be reading this wrong, that they did just enough for the gaming side, for the gamers to be fine with what they offered. But for the first time in several years, I heard gamers talking positively about Intel's Panther Lake, which has a street name. I think maybe it's Intel Ultra 3 or something like that. I'm not exactly sure. But gamers that have historically trashed Intel, and in the case, usually I'm getting this information from gamers on YouTube, and these guys have even built up an audience and a following based on hating Intel. Very similar to me. I hated on Intel forever. And then a year ago, almost to the day, I went mega bullish on it, and from a stock perspective. Same thing on the gaming side is I actually saw people talking positive about Intel. That is a challenge a little bit to AMD. Not to say that AMD stock is going to completely fall apart. As I normally say when I look at the chart, there are areas where I do like AMD. Where I do like AMD is after this gap fills. There's a pretty large gap between where it's at now at 204 down to 186, and probably even larger down to 172. I'd like to see this gap fill with AMD. It is having trouble getting through this 200 to 220 area. You got earnings in 26 days. I don't think there's any reason to buy any of these stocks before now and before they report earnings. And some of you might ask, why wouldn't you buy this stock now? You are either going to get confirmation that things are great over at AMD, and yes, you will buy it at a higher price. Let's say things go great and it pops, but that just confirms that this is now support. 206 is now support. So cool. On a little bit of a pullback, I can buy AMD. Okay. Right now, on a little bit of a pullback on AMD, I am worried this gap is going to fill and you're going to come all the way down here to 150. Okay. So you're going to have like a 20% drawdown in this one. And look, with poor earnings and maybe Intel's cutting into them, I don't know. I think it's too soon to find out. Although Intel's latest chip is going to be shipping at the end of this month. And also you have the pressure with memory prices and stuff like that on the consumer devices. And, gamers can be fickle, although I think if you look at the top selling gaming, products out there made by either Intel or AMD is completely dominating. And I don't think that changes. But the stock's on an island technically, and I'm either waiting for a pullback, which triggers a buy, or a move higher, which would confirm some support level that you buy into. That's what I'm seeing, at least technically. Fundamentally, they got great leadership. They got great product. It is destined to win a silver medal in the data center. Broadcom and Nvidia are not going to give up a lead here, at least from what we've seen with those companies. They're not going to give up the lead that they have. This company is going to win silver medal in the data center. They're winning gold in PC and in gaming, with the potential, though, that Intel is coming on. And Intel has the foundry. And I wouldn't even put Intel's PC or what they're doing there really the key. It's foundry. If Intel nails foundry and they become silver medal foundry behind TSM, it might be $1 trillion stock. Do I have any thoughts on Coscar Group or Semsera? I don't actually. I would say I don't. CSCG. I don't know. I'll just tell you, I don't know those tickers off the top of my head. So I'd have to look at them. But if you give me, I tell you what, B Slayer, before the next live, maybe drop it in the chat or something if you happen to see it. I mean, I'm not trying to tell you to do more work than you already do. Showing up for the live streams enough. But drop it in the chat maybe a day or two before. You can always send me an email as well, or an instant message on a social platform or whatever, or drop it in a chat on one of these videos that I have. And then I'll look into it and I'll have an answer for you. This coming from Jack. He's saying it seems the market is worried about this year's mega AI capex, and Nvidia and Broadcom and AMD are all down on these worries. What do you expect from AI's capex this year? It's going to be more. It's already set in stone. They're already going to commit to it. They all report earnings very soon. We will get reads on these capex. Let's see who's going to give us a pretty solid capex number. Probably Amazon. That's in 21 days. We'll hear from Google in 26 days. Apple's not really one of them. What's the other one? Meta. Meta is going to be the big one, because that'll send the stock one way or another. They've already telegraphed that they're going to spend more. If they announce that they're going to spend less, it actually will help the stock a little bit. But I think they should spend more. That's in 27 days. And you obviously have Microsoft as well. They're all going to be reporting in about 3 weeks, 20 days for Microsoft. They are all going to be reporting that they will be spending more and that they've virtually already committed to it. And they will point to revenue opportunities and things that are happening there. Now, that outside of Meta, the three companies that I point to, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft, they need to spend more because they have customers inside of their cloud, which are renting the excess capacity that these companies have. And so I fully expect that Amazon, Google, and Microsoft in particular cannot allow anybody else into what we would call the mega cap cloud game. They don't want a fourth competitor. They want to leave it at 3. And so these companies are going to do everything they can to spend as much CapEx as possible. What I think is you do have some fatigue. You have CapEx fatigue. You have fatigue on Nvidia and Broadcom. And this is very, very, very normal for investors, particularly, of any size, whether it's professional money manager or whatever. Just get fatigued with a name. We saw it with Nvidia, minus out kind of the April drawdown. Okay, it's hard to assume that didn't happen, but minus out that drawdown. And I'll slide this chart over so you can kind of see. Like Nvidia was trading from June of 2024 to March of 2025 for a year. This thing was trading in a pretty tight range, like a $30 range. You could widen it out. Maybe it's closer to a $50 range, but largely most of the candles in a year's time was in a $30 range. It's actually very normal for Nvidia to go sideways. And I flash forward to where we are at today, Nvidia has, it's even a tighter range, especially if you don't include kind of the like a blow off top. This thing is traded since July of 2025 till today, January 2026. This thing is traded in like a 20, most of the candles, that's probably 95. I'm on a daily chart here. Most of the candles, in fact, if you want to switch this to like a weekly chart and zoom in, look at this. This thing has traded in a 2-week, outside of 2 weeks, and we were talking about just partial weeks of those 2 weeks. This thing is traded in a $20 range. And so that is what happens oftentimes with, especially as you get into the stratosphere that Nvidia, this is not unusual at all. And it's not just Nvidia. I remember Amazon. So go to like the Amazon chart. Amazon chart, let's go back to this consolidation period. This was like post, so you had this so you had COVID, and it was like, oh shit, Amazon's amazing. Well, Amazon, after the pump of COVID, traded between 145 and 198. That's only like about a $50 trading range. It stayed there from June of 2020 all the way until April of 2022. So almost 2 years traded in a very tight range. And then you had Jeff Bezos' wife selling and kind of that 2022 collapse of shares. And then it's obviously rallied, and the chart looks amazing since then. I mean, this still looks amazing. So you have these areas of consolidation. It's very, very normal. It's nothing to be overly concerned about. You can see the same consolidation level with Broadcom. In fact, more recently, it's very consolidated. This often happens in the large stocks. I see this with the large stocks, particularly when the business is very well known. There's nothing that can overly surprise us to the upside, but there's also not enough of the business deteriorating. In fact, nothing really deteriorating to get people to really want to sell either. And so you're not generating enough excitement to drive the shares meaningfully higher, but also at the same time, not disappointing enough to drive the shares meaningfully lower. So trading in a range like this, not at all untypical. Also nothing to be overly concerned about, because to use Nvidia, go back to the Nvidia example, it traded in a pretty tight range. Yeah, you did have the tariffs, but that was a broad market thing. You minus off those candles and smooth that out, if you will. Well, yeah, you went from 120 on this one to 180 in, that's like just a couple of weeks. Okay. This is why, number one, you want to stay invested, but also number two, you want to pick your spots when you buy these stocks, when they go into these ranges. You want to try to buy them at the bottom of these ranges. And, you know, it's a little bit of, people say, hey, don't time the market, don't do this, that, and the other. I think that's a bunch of bull crap, especially the larger the company. You can absolutely time these things. Now, is your batting average going to be 1,000? Absolutely not. Is your batting average going to be 800, 80%? Probably not. But if you can batting average this at a high level, then you're going to make, because like I said, Nvidia went from 110 in July of 2025 to 173 in, like, this is, sorry, it went from April to July. So April, May, June, July. In 3 months, you bolted on $70 to $80 onto the stock. And I'm not saying the exact same thing is going to happen, but if this pattern plays out, and if I was a betting man, if you will, and there was a Kalshi spread or poly market spread on this, it's like, what do you think's likely to happen? Nvidia going on a 30% run to the upside or a 30% run to the downside? I'm going to bet on the 30% run to the upside, because there are buyers at these levels. There's buyers at the previous highs. There's a lot of support for the stock underneath it. And then once you do break out, they tend to want to run. And so there is some fatigue around AI CapEx, but I do believe monetization and profits. First of all, there's profits already there. It's just confusing to most investors. Not to the investors that are tuning in here, but to the general public for sure. Any further thoughts on Intel after TAN meeting with President Trump today? I was sitting there at lunch, folks, and I saw that President Trump spotlighted Intel in one of his Truth Social things. And I thought it was funny because President Trump, in a Truth Social post, first of all, what is the first thing he did? He talked up Intel's product. He said they just launched the first sub 2 nanometer CPU processor. Guarantee you he had to cut and paste that from somewhere because President Trump, all due respect, doesn't know what a 2 nanometer CPU processor is. He says they designed, built, and packaged it right here in the USA. Then he goes on. So he bragged on the product first. Then he says the USA is a proud shareholder. So now he's talking up the stock. And he said, we've made tens of billions of dollars in just 4 months. And the first thing he said, which I skipped, is he talked up the leadership. A guy that he said was supposed to be fired earlier in the year. And this is where I gained every ounce of respect for Lip-Bu-Tan. And I think I've said this before in a live stream. President Trump said that Lip-Bu-Tan should be fired. And he said it publicly, and he said it on Truth Social, which is just extraordinary for a president to do that. We can argue whether or not he should be doing that. That's not for me to do. I'm an investor like you all, and we all have to roll with the punches. And when President Trump throws a punch, you have to roll with it. And he said Lip-Bu-Tan should be fired. Well, what did Lip-Bu-Tan do? He scheduled a meeting with President Trump in the Oval Office and walked in there. Not only got the president to reverse him wanting him to get fired, he walked out of there with an investment from the United States government. And now here we are, what is it, maybe 5, 6, 7 months later, and President Trump is talking up Intel's leadership. He's talking up their product, and he's talking up the stock. No matter what you think about President Trump, folks, if you're an Intel shareholder, you got the president of the United States pumping your bags. Needless to say, I have been bullish. I started being bullish, and I wrote an article yesterday. I don't have all the stuff up here, but I posted a video, I think it was about a year ago, 3 reasons why I bought Intel stock. So I posted a video. This was public. Shares were at $20 or somewhere in there. When we launched Equity Empire, shortly after that, I believe Intel reported earnings, and I recommended it to the paid subscriber at 20. I think it was $20.50 or $20.05, one of those. And here we are, 6 months later, a year later from my, my total recommendation of Intel. The investment is up 100%. Okay. I will tell you, I have not taken profits. I don't plan on taking profits. I would not take profits at these levels. Now, this is speculative for me. If my shares of Intel go to zero, doesn't impact my life. In fact, all my shares could go to zero. Wouldn't impact my lifestyle, but certainly Intel could go to zero. Wouldn't impact my life. This still has high upside. For the premium subscribers, I've recommended it at higher levels as well. So I initially recommended it at 20 or whatever it was, but I've also recommended it at higher levels because a stock that you have visibility into the future, you should actually continue to rebuy it. Especially if you didn't invest in it at the beginning, because usually I make these calls hopefully early, hopefully not too early, but hopefully early enough to allow people to gain positions in these things and then capture it before the rest of the market takes off. I think this stock has much further upside. And I believe if we want to say everything goes perfectly for Intel over the next 3 years, this could be $1 trillion stock. Right now it's at 200 billion. So you can imagine a 5x on this one. That's the perfect upside. Not saying that's what's going to happen, but I'm saying if you nail Foundry and you nail Foundry and you supplant TSM, you nail Foundry to where you're comfortably number 2 Foundry in the world to TSM, where you're the second option on the leading edge, Intel could be $1 trillion stock. Speaking of Uber, did you see Nvidia announce? Yeah. That software stacks. I tell you what, that software stack that Nvidia announced that, is very similar to, maybe somewhat similar to what Tesla has offered. It's a bigger deal for car companies, I think. The Mercedes, the Fords, the GMs, they're not going to be able to develop this stuff on their own. Okay. It's probably somewhat of a big deal for Tesla in a somewhat negative way, that you have another very capable hardware software company that is going to be able to allow Ford and GM and Mercedes to have cars having similar capabilities. Because as a Tesla owner, I will tell you, now the defining feature of the car is the fact that it drives itself. I can't get rid of that. And if Mercedes makes a car that drives itself as good as the Tesla does, well, I could totally see myself buying a Mercedes. Or if Ford builds a really safe car that also can drive itself, I could see myself buying a Ford. So I think it does, in my opinion, for Tesla. I don't think for Uber, I don't think it means much. I think Uber's got a lot of things that it has to deal with. I think what it does, it puts heavier pressure on the robo-taxi business for Tesla, and it puts more pressure on the Optimus robot, which, if you're around for the first part of the show, I believe, based on what I saw at the Consumer Electronics Show, humanoid robots are still 1 to 2 years away from doing anything at a big enough scale for Tesla, which is like $1 trillion company. You have to do some big stuff for it to matter. For a little company in China or a little company like Figure or some of these other little companies out there, yeah, a humanoid robot that you're selling hundreds of units of is a big deal. But for Tesla, they need to sell a ton of these things. How'd you look at hydrograph clean power? Graphene for multiple. I tell you what, my blue ball. Wonder if my brother's going to be getting that here in Vegas when he goes down to the bar later. He laughed at that. I don't know. I tell you what, my focus is, just so everybody knows, my focus is to find blue chip or larger cap companies, probably a better way to say it, larger cap company opportunities for the paid subscriber. I'm not seeing as much on the energy side, and it might be just a blind spot for me. Might just be a blind spot for me that I'm not seeing as much opportunity there as I'm seeing in hardware. I'm seeing in software. And it's likely because the incumbents on the large cap energy side obviously have core business around residential and other types of business. I'm looking there, but I don't see the upside potential as I'm seeing in other places, is how I would say that. But I will look into it, because a blind spot is not good to have, and I probably should have saw it. Any thoughts on quantum stocks, or is it too early? Depends, Cliff, on your risk tolerance and your appetite as an investor. Too early for me. Quantum is still several years away, just like humanoid robots, several years away. And so if I were to invest in any quantum stock, here's what you have to understand: that if, as the stocks go up, they're going to dilute you and continue to raise money and raise more and more money. I personally, if I were to invest in a quantum company, if I wanted to get let's say I want to get exposure to quantum stocks, there's probably ETFs out there where inside of the ETF, you're getting some exposure to the qubits and the ion Qs and those. And then maybe there's like Nvidia in there and Google and IBM. Because if I were to invest in quantum on the blue chip side, I would probably gravitate towards IBM and Google, which have some advances there. You could probably throw Nvidia in there as well. And so if I were to invest in quantum, I would like to have, in the case of IBM, where it's kind of a moonshot for them. Same thing with Google. It's kind of a moonshot for them. And then with Nvidia, they'll have if quantum becomes a thing, they'll have the capability either to go buy the quantum stock or buy the technology or get their way into it one way or another. They'll just be the 800-pound gorilla, and it'll be hard for anybody else to supplant them. For the ion Qs and the qubits, they are just too volatile for my taste. And they go up and they go down too quickly for me. And that's just me. Look, if you bought quantum stocks a year ago, you'd have a lot of money. And so it's not, just because something's not for me doesn't mean you can't make money on it. It's just where I am in my investing career and where I am from a risk perspective. And just from like a knowledge perspective, I feel like I have enough knowledge on enough stocks. I don't necessarily need to take that amount of risk where I can say, hey, for me, risk was buying Intel a year ago. It's up 1%. That's good for me. Is it up as much as Qubits and some of these other stocks? Probably not. Is it up as much as Palantir or SoFi? Probably not. But it's enough risk for me. And at the same time, Broadcom's up probably 30 or 40% over the past year. Even like a Google and an Amazon have done well over the past year. That's good enough for me. But if you're out on that risk spectrum and you like high flyers and you like the adrenaline rush of the whole thing, my gosh, you're a better man and a better investor than me. And I just tell me, I want to live vicariously for you. Tell me how fun it is to watch those things go up. And I will be nothing but thrilled for you, honestly. But until they start generating revenue and maybe get a little bit closer to commercial launch, same thing on the nuclear stocks. I mean, if you're pre-revenue or like a lot of revenue, it's just a little early for me, to be honest with you. Quality Invest, Aria. Hopefully you're doing good, man. Let's bring you on the live. Let's bring you on our next live. We'll be doing earnings. Maybe we'll go live for Uber earnings or something like that. And that'll be fun. Appreciate it having him on. Jack saying he's a subscriber. Thank you. May I suggest you put the market price column in your recommended portfolio? Yes. So he's saying we have on our website, we have we have a recommendation list. And I'll tell you what, Jack, I'm still trying to balance, not trying to overload the amount of information, but giving you enough to where you can make these decisions. And you're not being overwhelmed with a bunch of data. That's number one. Number two, to have market prices on there, I do need a market feed, and to get market prices of stocks and then to integrate that into a website. Now, first of all, I'm not going to say that's impossible. Also, it's not wildly expensive to pull that off. It would be like, probably tens or hundreds of dollars a month. So none of that is a limiting factor. But I will say I'm trying to keep things as simple as possible. But these are things that we will integrate over time. Right now, I want to stay focused on the research and the opportunities. And some might call me cheap, but also just from a website perspective, I like to keep things as minimal as possible, only introducing features. But I do agree with you that a market price column would be ideal. And it is something I've surface level looked into, and I will continue to do that. One thing I will tell you, Jack, is what I'm looking at is I think what's more likely is we will partner with a software provider that will essentially license their software to us, to where you're going to be able to input your portfolio and your stocks into that software, and that it will track all of this stuff for you. First of all, that kind of software already exists. It's now just a matter of me finding which one will be the best fit for all of the subscribers. That's what I would say. And that's what I'm going to work on. I think that's probably going to be a more elegant solution, is that we have like a dashboard, I think, on the website that will actually be somewhat customizable for you, to where you're going to be able to upload the stocks that you have, or maybe it automatically uploads them based on the recommendation, and then it will upload this stuff. That is all stuff I'll tell you, that's a 2026 thing. And that is something after I'm done with CES and probably through earnings, because we are 3 weeks from earnings. And as you know, that's a very exciting time. Once we get through that, and then there's 25, 30 days of, I wouldn't call it downtime, but less earnings news, then I will go into that. But I know there's some stuff out there from a software perspective that I've seen and I kind of like, and then I'll work on that. And we'll probably send out maybe like a survey pretty soon, kind of like a suggestion box, if you will, and we'll try to tighten some things up. I do appreciate that. Want to make an end of year 2026 prediction. Will we be green again? I think so. I mean, I think it'll be very similar. Like if we want to pull up like SPX or something like that, or the Qs or whatever. Will we have this big drop? I mean, these are really hard to predict because it's always some outside force. Anytime in the market, obviously, I mean, you guys know this, but anytime the market has these big drops, it's because of some unforeseen event. But what we've seen is these are very great buying opportunities. So I actually really hope there's some unforeseen event that gives us these great opportunities to pile into what we need to buy as investors. I think we end up green. I think there's enough tailwinds across so many different things, whether you want to talk about macro, but even the micro level, even the setups of Nvidia, which I talked about maybe 15, 20 minutes ago. The setup in Nvidia actually looks great to me. This thing is consolidating. It has found support. Yes, it hasn't broken out, but the minute this thing, if it does break out, it is going to drag everybody else with it. And so that is, and look, maybe in 48 days you get that. I don't know, but they are a little supply constrained over at Nvidia. But I think you all know that the demand is incredible. Are we invested in China tech? If you are, stay there. I'm not really the way I would invest in Chinese tech. I actually have a robotic ETF that I've invested in, and I would say outside of Nvidia and Tesla and a handful of other companies, most of it actually is Chinese companies. That's how I invest in China. I don't try to go in there and pick individual winners and losers in China. If you have more knowledge about China than I do, you have more research, you've done more research, you live there, you visited there, all those types of things. Like for sure. Now I have some exposure through Starbucks and Nike, but I think that's, I think you're talking about pure Chinese technology companies or pure Chinese companies. The way I would do that is through an ETF. And what I would just say is do go look at the holdings. The way I'm playing it in China is my view is, as I explained here on the live stream, is with the humanoid robots, we're 1 to 2 years away. China is probably closer to 1 year. The United States is probably closer to 2 years. China probably closer on the hardware. The United States closer on the software, and the two will converge, and it'll be in this 1 to 2 year time frame. But there's going to be Chinese robots that are amazing, and there are going to be United States robots that are amazing. And so if you do want a piece of that in your portfolio, for sure, if you can do single stocks in China, man, you probably could crush. But I do it through ETFs. That's how I get some exposure to China. Thoughts on Palantir? Like many people, on paper, Palantir is wildly overvalued. But it's an incredibly run company. For most accounts that I see, they have an incredible product. They have leadership that I respect. I think the challenge with Palantir is if you get let's say a progressive Democrat wins the next presidential election, well, a company like this is going to get targeted because they're making technology that is against some of the maybe immigration and maybe some of the stuff that we did just more recently in Venezuela. Not that a company like this doesn't have business or whatever, but I could see people attacking this company from a government perspective, very similar to Trump. Trump this week was attacking defense companies and housing companies. Okay. So he's kind of normalizing that. And so if that gets normalized and a progressive Democrat gets elected, Palantir's got some problems. That's the problem. The no problem with the stock performance. It's up over the past year. It's up over the past 6 years. It's 10 year. I mean, everything looks great chart wise across the board. On paper, it's overvalued. And that's I think I have 20 shares of Palantir. I bought 20 shares at a low price just to kind of put it on a watch list. So I have a couple of shares. Wouldn't surprise me if you have a big drawdown in this one, but Tesla has been overvalued for the entire history of the company. Amazon was overvalued for about 20 years. So I don't put all my stock into paper, finance 101 evaluation. So it matters until it does. It doesn't matter until it does. And we've seen it not matter. But I think from a product perspective, it's fantastic. Leadership perspective, it's fantastic. But my only concern with Palantir is depending on how I don't know when the next presidential race is, maybe 2028. Depending on how that's shaken up, if in the summertime you're sitting there and you're thinking, a progressive Democrat's going to win, then you might want to lighten up on your Palantir. That's how I would see that one. Of the Mag 7, what do you see as the best long-term opportunity? Got to go with Amazon. You've got a $1 trillion revenue opportunity. In fact, when you look at the earnings estimates, Wall Street's expecting $1 trillion to show up sometime at the end of 2028 or 2029. When you have $1 trillion in revenue, it's not $1 trillion valuation. We have $1 trillion in revenue projected by Wall Street. And this would be growing at a consistent growth rate, 10% growth over the next 3 to 4 years. You will get to $1 trillion in revenue. And put very coldly, I believe Amazon is going to replace a large percentage of their employees with robots, whether it's at the delivery level, the drone level, the humanoid robot level, the delivery van driving itself. I believe Amazon will do that. And with $1 trillion in revenue, you can do the math. $2.6 trillion valuation today. You replace 10%, 15, 20% of your workforce with robots. And you can do, you can see how much opportunity is there. Any thoughts on Cadence? Cadence, I think design software, I think it is what it is. Yeah, CDNS. I think, no, CS. No, sorry. CDNS. Yeah, I've looked at this company, Design Systems. I like it when I've looked at it. I think at the right price. Let's pull this up on technically because you actually could be at a price technically. I'd have to do a little more research and see where they're at, but this chart looks amazing. It's it's I wouldn't call it like a back the truck up moment on the chart, but this is, you are at a spot where you are south of kind of what I would call the main channel. That's the main channel. That's been intact for 5 years. You want to stretch this out to a longer time frame, it's a similar story. I mean, that's the Great Recession trend. You're above the Great Recession trend, but a lot of stocks are, so it's not that big of a deal. This is a buying opportunity from a chart perspective with a stop underneath these lows. Wouldn't want to see it get meaningfully below 220. So you're risking, when I say these things, it's it's a quick drop down, or if it's a permanent rollover. But usually by then they find some footing and they bounce, risking 100 to the downside to, 100 upside. So it's in a good spot technically. If you like it, you've done the research on it. Chart looks fantastic to me. Not like back the truck up fantastic, but it's amazing. Oracle. Last time I was in Las Vegas, I was at Oracle World, and the chart looks okay. This is the level you want it to hold. Looks okay to me, technically. You've got earnings in 67 days. But what I will say is at the data center level, not as excited about these data center stocks. I just, Oracle's a little bit different. It's not pure play, but most of the valuation and most of the future is tied to that. But not, as most of you know, I'm not super. Now, I still hold Nebula. I still got a little bit of Nebula stock. I've taken profits on it and made a ton of money, but I still hold a little bit of shares there. But I sold all my Oracle. Oh, no, I'm sorry. I had 2 different positions in Oracle. I still have a long-term position in Oracle. That's probably up 20 or 30% or something. So something relatively modest, considering it's been about a year. I don't mind it. I don't mind Oracle, but you're tied a little bit to OpenAI, which is a long shot. Any thoughts on Rivian? I like the cars. I think they look fantastic. Wow, look at that. That chart. Oh my gosh. That is a thing of beauty. Now, the long-term chart still is bad, but guys, this is what you call a bottoming formation right here. That's fantastic. That is a beautiful looking bottoming formation. You'd want to stop under somewhere under these lows. But my guess is if you're going to buy Rivian, it's a flyer type position. Not saying you don't want to stop, but the ultimate stop is down here at 8. You don't want to get this thing below 8 because you got below 8, it's bankruptcy. But a stop underneath any of these 4 lows. You have one at 8, you have one at 9 or 10, you have one here at 11, you've got ones here at 12. Yeah, you can buy this one. Now, it looks like it's just made a new higher high. It wants to walk back to kind of the middle of the channel. Yeah, I'd buy this one anywhere from 17 down to call it, 13 and hope that this is the bottom and it reverses. And, like what's the Palantir? Like here's a Palantir chart. Look at the Palantir chart. There's the Palantir chart before the run. What's that chart look like? You had a massive run. You had a massive sell-off. You had the pure bottoming formation, and then off to the races. Not saying I'm not putting Rivian in that category of type of company that can pull that off. But I can't remember the Rivian stock chart. And stock chart looks to me like this is trying to bottom. That's what that looks like to me. Now, a lot of things can happen. They can try to raise money. The stock goes up. They raise money. The automobile business is still under pressure. But if you listen to the automobile suppliers, they're talking a little more positively right now. And if you get 10, I saw somewhere where the 10-year automobile loans, you get 10-year automobile loans, sure makes a Rivian a lot cheaper. But I like the product. I like Rivian's product. I like what they're doing. I think they're doing some stuff on full self-driving. I think it's a good product, and that chart looks like it's bottoming to me. Is Oracle on the software side? Yeah, they're on the database side, and they have a clear. Oh, and they also make, I think what's maybe referred to as ERP software, but they also have software primarily in the healthcare space, like hospitals and doctors' offices and stuff, run off of. Top of my head, I can't remember the name of the software, but they got that through an acquisition. They have other software that they bought through an acquisition. If that is a level of support. Their database is also very, very key. The problem is the stock got a little memey, if you will, or a little meme stock like with the kind of parabolic move. But I love Oracle. If we can find some footing with the stock, technically price wise, then I'm absolutely going to be back into it. But just to give you an idea, I had 2 positions in Oracle. Bought one in an IRA account. I kind of have a rule. I don't even look at that account. I don't log in. I just buy the stocks, forget about them 20 years from now. Hopefully they're higher. But I have a Robinhood account where they give me margin and I like the product. And I've got a couple of bucks over there. I'm in and out of that stuff. In fact, that portfolio was up. I think that portfolio, let's just see over the past year. That one's up 21% over the past year. And you might say like the S&P 500's up more than that. Well, that's mostly realized though. Like most of that 21, I think probably like 17 or 18% of that 21% is cash in the bank realized. And my retirement portfolio was up 27% over the past year. So relatively equal performance. I sold out of Oracle in the what I would call maybe a trading account or shorter term account. Retirement account, it's still in there. Search rich for Google regarding Grok. I think I can't believe how much search has been durable. And I'm sure most of you watching this, your Google searches have gone way down, and they're going to continue to trend down. Now, is my mom using Grok? Probably not. Is the 60-year-old guy using Grok? Probably not. Not really. But the AI summary, you know what it sucks for is the people with websites. If you have a website, the AI summaries is terrible. I think Google still has some risk on the search side, but is the challenge for so let's assume their competitor is OpenAI and maybe Grok. Grok I put into a special category along with Meta, where they have a distribution platform that has a moat, right? So you're going to go to X and maybe use Grok, but you're still going to go to X because there's maybe instant information, there's stuff there. Same with Instagram. You're going to go there to look at cool stuff or chicks or whatever. Facebook, same thing. WhatsApp, same thing. There's a moat around social media, if you will. Search engine is competing directly with the chat bot, the Anthropic chat bot or Alexa chat bot or whatever it is. But when we're looking at OpenAI in particular, who has the most traffic to lose, standing up an ad business is probably harder than Google holding on to search traffic, I think. Standing up an ad business is very, very tough to do. Very difficult to do. So I'm less bullish on OpenAI being able to compete with Google on the consumer side. And so Google, I think, is going to own the consumer side. I think Meta is going to have something integrated inside of their thing, which they already do, basically. Grok for sure is going to exist. Grok is going to be a major player on the consumer side, but also because they have distribution through their own app. And Grok is very helpful on Twitter itself, where somebody doesn't know what you just said or they want clarification. They ask Grok and Grok answers. That's a really cool feature that Google's not going to give you, and it's great for Grok. So Google has search risks for sure, but they also own YouTube. They also own Waymo. They have a lot of stuff going on. So, I think Google's stock will pull back, but it'll be a buying opportunity. United Health, I've been staying out of the insurance guy. I don't know if it's like the right thing. Technically, it's in, I don't want to say no man's land, but I don't know. I always read the conference calls of UNH. You'll get one in 19 days. I still just think it's a little early. We've got these healthcare subsidies that are probably going to come back. Maybe they don't. I don't know. You've got overhang with UNH where they mispriced, I think it was Medicare Advantage plans. I just, again, if there's a blind spot in my investing, it's insurance. And again, not to say it's not a great investment or it's a good investment, especially if you time this one right. But still just too many questions, I think there. Still too many for me. For premium subscriber, could you shed some light on better ways to pick up options on your recommendations? That would be great. Yeah, I would say we'll do more on the options side. I will say with a paid subscription, especially when it gets to the larger side, it is a little bit of a challenge on options because, as you know, there's only so much open interest on an option. And so I actually saw this when I worked at MarketWise. There would be like guys there that would recommend options. And if it became really a popular service, what would happen is they would kind of blow up the option, the price that they recommended. So the way they had to recommend options made it actually really complicated to understand, particularly if you weren't into options, and you really had to you had to be really careful with how you recommended options to a service with 500, even to 1,000. And certainly as you get into maybe 10,000 subscribers, where they're kind of following, the crowd, there's kind of this, crowd funding, if you will, of people buying in a crowd or a group. It is a little tricky with options because there's only now with like Amazon options or something like that. It's not as difficult. But yeah, definitely expect more of that in the future for sure. What I will tell you is, with the premium subscription, the goal for me is to constantly add features and not raise the price. So very similar to Robinhood. I've been a Robinhood member for almost 10 years now. In fact, I think I joined in like 2016 or something. And Robinhood gets consistently better every year, and they don't raise the price. The Robinhood Gold's like $5 or whatever. Even if they raise it to $10, it'd be fine. But Netflix is the same. Costco is very similar. That's the model we're going for, is that we charge you something and it's good right now and it just gets better. And that's the goal. Constellation Software on the CSU. It's like California State University on the Canadian. Yeah, I'll have to look at Constellation Software. I'm not like I'm not an expert here. So I'm gonna have to figure out what's going on here. Chart looks like it wants to bottom, like most software. I am bullish broadly software, but whether or not the market agrees with me is tough. Colin, making a salmon chickpea salad with roasted potatoes. Visit Washington State if you're hungry. I'm down. Actually, I want to go up that way. I've got a nephew playing soccer in Oregon. So obviously that's just south of Washington State. So I'd love to make it up there soon. Thoughts on Elon's lawsuit going to jury? I think you're talking about him and OpenAI. I think Elon's just, I think Leon just is being a pain in the ass to OpenAI, and that sucks for OpenAI. And it's great for Elon because he has, almost an unlimited budget compared to OpenAI. So I think he has more liquid cash than that company does. So I would like to be Elon, and I would not want to be OpenAI. I don't know about the lawsuit. I don't know if it has merit, but considering a judge let it move forward, that tells you all you need to know. And now you get in front of a jury, and God knows. Now it's, OpenAI's lawyers versus Elon's lawyers, and I got to imagine Elon's probably got some pretty slick attorneys. OpenAI IPO prevented? Maybe. I think the OpenAI story is really, we are in the first or second chapter with that company. And considering think about Microsoft right now. Microsoft has the third or fourth largest online ad business in the world. Okay. Why? Because they run through Bing and they run through Yahoo as well, I think still as well. And it's a great sell. I run Bing ad. I don't run them anymore, but I ran tens of thousands of dollars through Bing ads, and they were great. And people click on them. So it's real traffic. And they run ads on LinkedIn too. So you have Google, you have Meta, you have Amazon, you have Microsoft. How Microsoft has not stood up that ad platform on OpenAI is speaks volumes to me. Like, seems to me if you're OpenAI, you could click a couple of buttons and get those ads on your platform. Like, if you're going to integrate ads on your platform, why aren't you doing it that way? The fact that they didn't makes me think that Microsoft wants them to crash and burn maybe a little bit. Because if they crash and burn, it might be actually better for Microsoft than bad for them. So I think OpenAI's got a lot of people gunning for them. Obviously Google, obviously Grok and Elon, obviously Anthropic and anybody else out there, Amazon. I mean, everybody's gunning for them, and I don't know who's going to come to save them other than themselves. Good morning from Germany, Marcel. What do I think about Qualcomm? Qualcomm is one of the most hated stocks if you dig in deep into computer engineers. There's also people that hate on them from the fact that the Apple business is likely to dry up. But if you look at a computer chip company that has high upside, whether it's the glasses, which I think I showed you on the presentation, they are making chips that go into production ready glasses, these AI glasses. Okay. One of the only computer chips that are going in there. Now they're licensing technology from ARM, but that's not here nor there necessarily. They make PC chips, which are really good. They're making a ton of stuff on robotics. And I finally saw the CEO get on TV today and basically say, we're going to be a robotics company. Finally. So they've got all kinds of solutions that, yes, as the mobile business maybe turns a corner with Apple and then maybe Chinese domestic makers make other stuff, it's not that these chips can't make it into other places. Qualcomm belongs in a well-diversified semiconductor portfolio, is what I would say. Thoughts on risk for Comcast regarding Starlink? Yeah, that's a risk. I'm looking at companies that Starlink potentially could compete with, and I'm avoiding them. Starlink's a great service, and if they IPO, they are going to get a boatload of money. to market and potentially go acquire other stuff and launch other products. So yeah, I would not want to be. I mean, Comcast, I believe, has other businesses, maybe. But yeah, I wouldn't want to be fiber and like be building my fiber business right now. Probably not a good idea. I'd love to come to Texas someday, get some barbecue. That's absolutely what I want to do. I'd love to go there someday. I might be making a trip to Oklahoma, which I know is just north of Texas, I believe, and I would love to. And if I do, we talk. I was with John's here with me in Las Vegas. We were talking about could we do like an event, a seminar, something like that? I would skew more towards like let's have a meetup, let's have some fun. Let's go have some food or something. So yeah, I love barbecue. I'm down. Thoughts on, I think that's SanDisk, SNDK. I think this, yeah, SanDisk. I mean, you've been on an epic run. You're due for a pullback. You had a little bit of a pullback today. Memory is great. It's probably in a bubble, but the bubble is not going to deflate anytime soon. So memory on a pullback, probably not the worst thing. Anduril and Databricks, would love to see them IPO. I think the thing about the IPOs, the thing that might happen is if you get these big IPOs, whether it's Starlink or SpaceX or Databricks or Anduril or OpenAI or Anthropic, one thing that will probably do is pull money out of other stocks. So if you say you want to buy Anduril, or let's say let's say SpaceX comes public, and you want to get a chunk of that, you're going to have to probably sell some of your winners, and you're probably going to sell a winner or two. You might even sell some losers, but you're probably going to sell some winners to rebalance. So it will put some pressure on some other stocks. I actually like that opportunity for those stocks. I don't typically, I don't buy IPO stocks for at least 90 days, usually much longer than that. I like to let these IPOs kind of get drained out, and then I like to come in. I can't think of a stock. We actually on the paid side, we just recommended a stock that IPO'd not that long ago. And if you look at the chart, it looks similar to Rivian, where you had a drain out, and then now you've had a kind of a U-shaped bottom, and now we're pulling back off a U-shape. That's what I like for IPOs. I like wait, hype, get drained out. Meta did the same thing. I mean, this is a long time ago, but Meta did the same thing. Meta had hype, got drained out, and then has basically been straight up ever since then. Thoughts on Siemens? Yeah, Siemens. I mean, I would just say, if you like Siemens, stay in it. I think they've got a diversified enough business that if you like it, stay in it. If you want to get into it, find a level that you're comfortable with and get in it. But yeah, Siemens is fine. Any risk for telco carriers with Starlink? Probably, I would say. On the fiber side. I don't think on the cell phone side necessarily. I don't think so. I think the cell phone business is pretty entrenched. But on the fiber side, where, I mean, I had fiber and then I switched to Starlink because it was cheaper. And so on the pricing side, they might have some competition there. But I think on the cell phone side, I think they're pretty good there, because eventually you'll get 6G, and 6G will probably be better than what Starlink can actually offer. Starlink's upload speeds are not great. That's the problem with Starlink, is that it takes 30 minutes to an hour. In fact, I can't upload. I used to upload my videos in like 4 and 5K. I can't even do that anymore because it just takes too long on Starlink. So there were some advantages to fiber. My guess is Starlink will continue to work on their upstream or upload speeds going forward. I think they have to. It's not just a satellite thing. I think they need to get some technology on the ground. But telco carriers probably have some risk. Thoughts on Supreme Court tariff ruling? Yeah, we might get that apparently tomorrow. So, yeah, I think you're right. That I think I saw that there was kind of like a 60 or 70% chance of them being unconstitutional. Just from listening to people, I heard a lot of conversation about it today. I heard at CNBC in my ear the whole day. people were saying it might be a sell the news event. Like, if they unload the tariffs, or they rule the tariffs unconstitutional, that Nike won't go up 30 points tomorrow. And I tend to agree with that. 30 points is egregious, but even 3 points. I think President Trump, given that it is an election year, not for him personally, but in general, it's an election year. It's an important election year here in the United States. I think he's going to be a little, and I think we're getting telegraphed from that, like what he did with the defense companies this week, where he was like, you can't make enough money and do stock buybacks and all this stuff. That's somewhat progressive. And then what he said about housing, where he's like, hey, if you're BlackRock or a big institutional investor, you can't buy a bunch of homes. That's like something you would normally expect out of Elizabeth Warren, not President Trump. And so I think he's probably correctly playing this politically, where he knows his base is going to vote for him, but can he move towards the center on some issues and pick up some votes? And so as this relates to the tariffs, what I don't see happening is, if the tariffs are ruled unconstitutional, I don't necessarily see President Trump going ballistic and saying, well, F that, I'm going to take this other statute and make them 60%. I don't see him going off the rails. I could be wrong. He certainly could do that. He's certainly capable of it. But I don't see it completely going off the rails, is what I would say. And I think the market will digest the news one way or another. I will say the fact that they've priced in maybe a little bit of them being unconstitutional, if they stay in place, that could create some selling pressure, particularly of the tariff impacted regions. But in a lot of ways, the tariffs have encouraged some investment here into the United States. And so those companies will continue to benefit. Does Sam Altman give off shady vibes to you? Yeah, he does. Honestly, though, he gives off, 2012 Mark Zuckerberg vibes in a lot of ways, kind of creepy, not super self-aware vibes. So I think it's something that he'll grow into. I think he'll be okay. But at the employee level, the fact that they've lost so much head leadership over in OpenAI, and there was that moment where he was fired and then he wasn't. I don't know. I think he's trying to win the consumer market, which is obviously very difficult to do. Google is not going to lay down for that. Meta sure as hell is not going to lay down for that. And you're going up against those two companies, let alone a handful of other ones. I think OpenAI's odds of succeeding, whether you had Sam Altman running it or anybody else, is low. It's low. Thoughts on ZD? Zendesk? Ziff Davis? Is this the stock you're talking about? I don't know anything about this stock, but I thought Zendesk was ZD, but maybe not. $1.3 billion valuation, so it's a little lower than what I tend to look at. The chart, I don't know if you're talking about this chart, but it looks like to me the chart has found a level of support, if you will. And so if I bought this one, this is still very well you are in, no matter what chart we're looking at, this is as well defined as possible here. That is, you're waiting for a breakout there. You would not want to get it meaningfully below the current level or the previous lows down here at 28. You're looking for a break somewhere back into the $48 region. That would signal potentially you've got a new uptrend starting, and then you buy it on a pullback. That's how I would look at that one, just from a chart perspective. Do you participate in the prediction markets? Last night we had a bid on the Spurs, and I think I won a big $35 on the Spurs winning. what I would say about the prediction markets is I would try not to play them to a binary outcome. What I've seen is working, and this is just a like a really elementary view of this because I don't have I don't have the expertise here. But the way I would play the prediction market is last night the Spurs were favored by maybe 7 points in the basketball game, and the Lakers didn't have LeBron playing, and the Lakers don't have much of a bench. So my view was the Spurs would take a lead in the game, and the Lakers would not have the firepower to come back and score enough points to win. Turns out that's exactly what happened. But let's say I put a bet on the Spurs and the Lakers are looking unbelievable and the Spurs are playing sloppy. It looks like maybe they went out last night and they're just playing ugly. Well, I would close my bet, and instead of, losing all my money, which I think I maybe put $70 or something on the game, instead of losing 70, I would try to only lose 20. And so I would not play the prediction markets to a binary outcome to the downside. Now, the Spurs look good. The Spurs look like they were going to win the game. So I left the bet on, and the money came in. But I could see closing it out early if you wanted to as well. I would play it like a professional plays the options market. Almost no professional options trader plays options until expirations. They always roll them out or they close them out. That's how I would play the prediction markets. I would not play those to expiration. Don't think that would be a good idea. If your kid likes Netflix at the high, you have a good memory. Yes. My kids liked Netflix and bought it at the high, and I figured that was a topping indication. So, yes, my kids are stuck on Netflix stock, but they bought Costco. They bought something else. Maybe it's Eli Lilly. They bought Eli Lilly at the bottom. They're up huge on Eli Lilly. So I don't think they picked that one. I think I picked it. So, folks, we've been live for 2 hours and 45 minutes. I do appreciate everybody tuning in. It was a wonderful, wonderful week at the Consumer Electronics Show. And I do have a view on the midterm elections on the stock market. I think it's still a little early. I think it's still too early to really start to. Here's my view is let's assume that the Democrats here in the United States take the House of Representatives and the Senate or whatever. They still can't pass anything. They'll probably try to impeach Trump for the last 2 years of his term. And that's what they'll do. They'll try to make him look as bad as possible. And if it looks like J.D. Vance is going to run, they'll try to make J.D. Vance look as bad as possible. And if Marco Rubio is going to run or whatever, they're going to try to make any Republican that is going to run that is involved in the Trump administration, they're going to look as bad as possible. And they're going to, that's politics. They're going to try to come up with some investigation, and they're going to try to come up with some kind of scandal. And that's their job. That's their job. Their job is to get votes. How it'll impact the stock market, it might have a neutral, it might have a positive impact on the stock market. President Trump is more or less a lame duck unless you believe he's somehow going to run in 2028 or whatever. So he's somewhat of a lame duck. I think the following election 2 years later, or really the campaigning begins about a year later, that's the big one. That's the mother lode, because both parties will be at a crossroad. The Republicans will be Trumpless, if you will. Will it be a continuation of the MAGA agenda, I guess is one way you could look at it? Or will a more quote conservative Republican run? Or will and then on the Democrat side, it's probably even more fascinating. Will a progressive Democrat be the head candidate, or will maybe a quote more moderate Democrat be the one that gets the party's votes and the platform, if you will? That is completely still under investigation and still completely unknown. And to me, that is going to be one of the most fascinating stories, I think, of from 2027 on, that is going to be absolutely fascinating, is what happens there with particularly the Democrat Party, because I think we can all sit here and agree that yes, the Conservative Party is certainly more like a 90s Democrat, but the Democrat Party in particular has gotten more progressive. Not saying that's a good thing or a bad thing, but you know, that takes a certain level of commitment, and it takes a certain level of campaigning to elect someone like that at the national level. Now, in New York City or Vermont or in Minnesota, you can elect those people. And certainly out here in California, you can as well. But nationally, has it been proven that you can elect, a super uber progressive Democrat? I don't know. And we'll see. Thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate it. I'm a legend. I'm only a legend because you guys get to tune in. Now, tomorrow, the Fang Stock Recap Show, it will probably air, but it'll be later. I'm trying to get home in the mid-afternoon. I usually record that thing right at 1 p.m. And by the time it's edited and uploaded, it's usually up by like 2 p.m., 2:30, 3 p.m. Pacific time. That's probably about the time I'll be able to start recording. It's maybe 3 p.m., 4 p.m. So it'll be a late night show tomorrow, but I should be able to get that up. There would be an uprising if we even think about to do this. I agree. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, but I think it's going to be really entertaining. And I hope, folks, for the past 2 hours and 50 minutes, you were entertained right here from Las Vegas, Nevada. CES 2026 is in the books. I think the thing to remember is that there are 3 levels of product kind of life cycle, if you will. There's the concept, there's kind of a prototype phase, and then there's the straight production phase. I thought we were a little closer with humanoid robots, but after spending time at CES, we're a ways away. And the conversion, I think this will translate pretty well to the converging. You're going to hear a lot about physical AI and the converging of that. It takes time. It's going to take time. But what I will say is that it comes, and it comes all of a sudden, because I think self-driving cars is the perfect analog to this. 3 years ago, these things felt like they were 5 years away, and now they're here. They're not here in the small markets. They're not even going to be here at a broad level, but in major metro markets that have decent enough weather most of the year, my God, these things are everywhere already. In San Francisco, they're in a big way in Los Angeles. And as the years go on, it is going to become bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's where we're at with technology. It gets bigger and bigger every year. And all of a sudden you go from concept to prototype to production to really at scale. And that's where we're going with a lot of this stuff. And speaking of going, I am going to sign up for tonight. I appreciate you all tuning in. We'll have another live stream during earnings season. So we got another couple of weeks. We'll see what happens over earnings. I'll pick a couple of companies and a couple of dates where we'll go live, probably after the conference call. So it'll be a little bit later in the night, but certainly maybe when Nvidia report, Nvidia is a little bit later, but when the Googles and the Apples and the Microsofts and the Amazons report earnings, we'll come back for a live stream. I appreciate you all tuning in. I'll see you again tomorrow on the main channel for the Fang Stock Recap Show. Expect that to be probably a 6 or 7 p.m. type show. And if I ever have a chance to visit China, I would absolutely love to go. And it's a place I would love to go. And I got to get a passport first, but I would love to go there one day and probably spend a decent amount of time there, really understand what's going on there from a ground level. There are some sources, a lot of sources that I do rely on the ground in China. And so I certainly appreciate them, but I would love to go at some point. Thank you all for tuning in, folks. Have a great night. Have a safe night, and we'll see you again soon. But for now, I'm out of here.